Welcome to Look to the Moon podcast, bringing together two friends with stories that need sharing. Join us, Jodie and Nicole, as we navigate life after loss, discussing topics around birth, trauma and baby loss, and providing a safe space for others to share their stories. Hi everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Look to the Moon podcast. I'm here again with Nicole. How's your week been, Nicole?
Hello everyone. Yeah, my week's been good, thank you. Busy, but nothing new to report really. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
Haven't you just been camping?
Yes.
Tell us about your camping trip.
First camping trip.
Ever.
Managed to get Richard to come camping.
Which is actually quite surprising, knowing
I know.
the kind of person that Richard is, that you actually got him in a tent.
I'm minimalistic. Richard's really not.
No.
He needs
his material things around him.
Yeah.
Like
so
his 85-inch
I say we
TV.
went camping. Yeah. I say we go camping, but we were in like the biggest tent possible. Had a king size airbed.
Yeah.
Had a blow up corner sofa. Had a
it was
projector
glamping.
screen.
It wasn't camping really.
But it was great, and we all absolutely loved it, and Lila loved it. So we've already
Should have
booked
a good
another
time.
2 camping
Another
trips.
2?
Yeah.
Well, you've got all the gear now.
Well,
You're
exactly.
invested.
All the gear, no idea.
A bit like this podcast.
Exactly. That's how we roll, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not got a clue, but we give it a go.
Oh, well, that's amazing, though, that you've had a really good time and so you've dipped the toe in the water to try it. And I know you're a bit apprehensive about taking Richard and stuff. But you took the dogs as well.
Yes, I was going to say, so a 3-year-old
and 2 maniac dogs.
And 2 dogs, yeah. But we survived it and we all loved it. I think it was just so nice to be outdoors. You know, fresh air, like nothing to worry about.
Yeah, just checking out from everything.
Yeah, exactly. And we just had fun. So yeah, it was really good, thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you had a good time. Because you've got, like, say, you're looking at doing camping a bit more and staying in this country than going abroad.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we'll cover in my story shortly why we're not really keen on going abroad at the moment. So we're sticking to this country. Yeah. Driving, camping, and to be honest, it was so sunny when we went camping. It was like being abroad anyway. Yeah. And you can get campsites with swimming pools and stuff. So if you've got the weather, why not?
Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that we were talking earlier about some of the previous content in our episodes when we were discussing my story.
Yes.
And you wanted to elaborate on a subject that you felt you didn't do it justice necessarily in relation to my case. So
yeah, exactly.
We said that we'd discuss it a little bit on this episode so you can sort of elaborate. So I had trouble with my sodium levels, which caused hyponatremia, which was all about an imbalance of fluid.
Yeah.
So you just wanted to elaborate on that sort of situation from a medical perspective.
Yeah. So as we were saying before, you suffered with hyponatremia while you were still pregnant and in hospital, didn't you?
Yeah, during the labour.
I just don't think I explained it very well. More so in your situation. So obviously we mentioned last time that hyponatremia is low sodium. Which, as I previously said, it can cause heart problems, palpitations, high heart rate, things like that. But I think more so in your situation, it's just a point to say that obviously sodium is an electrolyte that helps keep all the fluid in sync and in your cells. And that is, when you've had low sodium, that's what's caused your swelling. Yeah. So you get a lot of water outside your cells and in your cells, which is your case, but also it can affect the kidney. So again, you mentioned that you got acute kidney injury, didn't you? Which you didn't know about until after, but that would have also been linked to the hyponatremia. And again, you said you passed it. It was passed, could be passed to Bonnie, which can cause in babies, obviously, the brain damage, as we previously mentioned. So I just didn't feel that I'd covered it very well. And people listening be like, oh, she's from a medical background.
But I suppose you just skipped a step because I said, what can it lead to? And you said issues with the heart. Yeah. So you're talking about more of the symptom of it.
Yeah, sorry. Right, I just pushed you on the chair.
Pushing me away from my
pushing
microphone.
Her away.
She's getting herself comfy. You were talking, you didn't elaborate on the symptom of a low sodium or hyponatremia. You just said what it can lead to. So that's the bit you wanted to add.
Yeah. So with your case, obviously the symptoms were that the doctors noticed that you were so swollen, and that did they notice that, I think, before they even knew you had low sodium? Or
no, so they were doing various blood tests, so they knew that I had low sodium levels.
Yeah.
They also knew I had an AKI, an acute kidney injury.
Yeah.
All of this was common knowledge, so they didn't flag it, or they didn't think it was as serious at the time.
Yeah.
And it was only when the consultant saw the physical swelling that they maybe put 2 and 2 together with the blood test results and expedited it.
Well, you had so much going on, didn't you? Because you were unable to pass urine as well because of Bonnie's head position.
Yeah.
So that would have contributed to it as well.
Because I was just adding fluid to my body.
Yeah, and the piling with your fluid because you weren't passing urine, but that was actually because of the baby's position.
Yeah.
And then that would have also contributed to the low sodium and everything else. So yeah, you had a bit of everything going on.
Yeah, there was a list.
Yeah.
Don't you feel like that's
clarified
no, definitely.
It a little bit more? Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit more information on that if anyone was questioning it, but I don't think they would, because Nicole knows what she's talking about, but she felt like she needed to elaborate. But this episode, as the 2 previous episodes, we spoke about my journey and my experience, and then the part 2 of that was how I had suffered mentally and the emotions that have gone along with that trauma.
Yeah.
The next 2 episodes, so episodes 4 and 5, I might have said welcome to episode 3, did I, at the beginning of this episode, which is totally wrong.
What? Yeah. What are we on?
4.
Oh.
I'll have to maybe
Well, I suppose
that.
It was episode 1, episode 2, episode
2.1.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, this is our 4th episode of recording, but it's Nicole's part 1. So Nicole's gonna start from the beginning and tell us about her journey. So why don't you start with you and your partner and your first child?
Okay. Yeah.
What the experience you had with that.
Yeah.
And then that's when you can then go into the pregnancy with your second daughter.
Okay. Right, so obviously I've got another little girl who's 3, Lila. So she was born in March 21. We were very lucky. We had no issues at all with getting pregnant, conception. We got pregnant very quickly, and I was one of the very lucky ones that didn't suffer with any symptoms, morning sickness or anything like that.
Yeah, you had quite straightforward pregnancy. Nothing to note, really.
No,
which is great.
Not at all. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was really good. Smooth pregnancy. I worked, as previously mentioned, I was working in the NHS at the time. Worked throughout the whole pregnancy. It was also during COVID.
But tell the listeners where you were working, because I think that's quite important.
So I was a nurse in A&E.
Yeah, and quite high up in A&E as well.
Yeah,
so the stress on your shoulders was quite
so I was a sister in A&E, so in charge of the department a lot of responsibility. So worked throughout my whole pregnancy up until I think I was about 36 weeks pregnant. And part of that was during COVID as well, obviously, because that was end of 2020, 21, beginning of 21.
Yeah, so we've been in it about a year, haven't we, by the time she was born?
Yes.
COVID.
Yeah. So, yeah, very lucky with that. With my labour, again, it was great. No complaints, really, compared to some people, I'm sure. Very quick for a first
birth, I think everybody was surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I was. I didn't even believe I was. I didn't believe I was in labour, because I was just like, woke up at I don't know what it was, about middle of the night, about 3 o'clock, and I thought, I've got a bit of back pain. Yeah. But that's probably the only symptom that I ever had throughout my whole pregnancy was back pain. But the job that I did, I was on my feet for like 12, 14 hours a day, and I got back pain anyway. So that wasn't a big issue for me. Bit of back pain, so I was like, I'll just see if I can sleep through it. Kept falling on and off to sleep, and I was like, it seems to be coming quite regularly, and I was like, maybe it could be my contractions. So woke my partner up, said, I think this is it.
So where were you in terms of due date?
So I was 1 day over, so 40 plus 1.
So it was imminent.
Yeah,
really.
So prior to this, I was actually in the hospital the day before, because I was like, it's my due date, like, this baby should be due, and I was becoming obsessed with feeling her moving and not moving, and I was adamant that I hadn't felt her move. So I was like, right, hot, cold drinks, all that. We took the dogs out for a walk. I lay down and rested, lay on your left side, this, everything, and then thought, no, she's not moved. So rang the hospital, went into hospital, they did all the monitoring. And even when I was there, actually, I did keep getting this pain, but I was on the most uncomfortable bloody examination bed that I thought, oh, I've just got backache because I'm just uncomfortable.
It's this crappy furniture.
Yeah, but watching the monitor, like every time I got this pain, like, I don't know, the machines in pregnancy, but the CTG monitoring kept like going up. So I was like, oh. And I did tell the midwife or the doctor at the time and said, what's that? And she wasn't really interested. So I went home. Yeah, I was low risk pregnancy, but because of this reduced movement episode that I thought I had, and obviously she started moving as soon as I got there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like they usually do.
They do. Yeah. I then got put up into high risk. So they said that if I went into labour, I'd be on high risk, but if I went back the day after, had a scan just to make sure everything was fine, then I could still be low risk. So I was like, fine. So we were expecting to go for a scan the next day, but lo and behold, that night I obviously went into labour with this back pain, and I thought, oh yeah,
definitely
see how we go. Yeah, a few hours, nothing, like I didn't lose my waters or anything like that. Woke Richard up, and he was in charge of contraction monitoring.
You have to give him
You have to give him something to do, don't you? So he was like, right, got his phone, and every time I've got a contraction, he's doing that. We're still just upstairs at this point. He's just lazing around in bed, and I'm stood up because I did pregnancy yoga during this pregnancy. So I was like, right, doing all these, hip sways and all this, keep myself upright and moving. I mean, obviously helped because she came out not long after.
Yeah, but, you got her moving properly.
So not long after I woke Richard up, he was like, oh, my app says it's time to go to hospital. And I was like, give over, like, we've been doing this for 2 hours.
And
like,
what time was this?
This was probably about 5 o'clock in the morning,
right.
So only a few hours into it. And I was like, no way, Richard, like, we're going to be doing this all day, like, calm down.
Yeah, this is going to be like a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, but it kept coming, and they kept coming thick and fast, and Richard ended up ringing the labour ward himself just to say, like, look, she's in labour, having contractions, told them how regular it was, and they said, oh, well, she's just having, like, a burst of contractions. Tell her to take some paracetamol, have a bath, go for a walk, make sure she eats, and we'll see you later. Like, it's going to be later. Yeah. So I was like, see, told you so. Well, I took my paracetamol, didn't do anything.
Like it would.
Yeah, and then at this point I was
take
like,
a paracetamol.
Oh no, yeah. I was like, oh God, Richard, like, this is getting hard now, because I just didn't have a break in between the contractions. So we'd got my brother on standby because he was going to come and look after the dogs while we went into hospital. So called James, said, right, this is it, we're going to hospital. Richard was like, right, she said you've got to eat. He's chasing me around the kitchen as I'm going through my contractions with a bloody hot cross bun. Priorities. He's like, come on, she said you eat. I'm like, I don't want to eat. Like, this is the last thing that I want.
I love it's like hot cross bun because it's like right near Easter, so you can
I
get
love a hot cross bun, yeah,
and
you can eat as many as you want when you're pregnant, so I did, apart from this day.
Get out of my face if I had enough hot cross buns.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point I was like, oh no, Richard, this is a baby, like, baby's coming now. It was very, very strong contractions to the point I said, oh, I think I'm pushing, and Richard was like, hell no, let's get to hospital. So we got in the car. He was more worried about me. My water's breaking and giving birth in his car, but we managed to hold on, got into the hospital. Again, said to them, like, please can you get someone, like, I really think this baby's going to drop on the floor in a minute. And they didn't. They took forever, and then as soon as she came, she saw that I was like literally holding onto the wall screaming. She was like, oh, where's the pain? So I was like, oh, it's in my bum. And she was like, oh my God, let's get you into a room quickly. Took me into a room, didn't examine me. They just said, oh, she said something, give it the golden hour. Never heard of that. So if any midwives have heard that saying before, golden hour, we try not to push for an hour. It's like, this ain't me pushing, love, this is my body.
Body's doing it.
So, put the monitoring on the baby. Obviously I was in the labour ward, not in the, what do you call the other bit?
Induction ward?
No.
Maybe?
Midwifery led unit, because I wanted to go into the low risk. So my worst thing was being strapped to a bed with all monitoring, because I wanted to be upright from my yoga and all that. Anyway, no, I was strapped to a bed with monitoring. And then she said, "Are you sure your waters haven't broken?" I was like, "No, like I think I'd know if my waters had broke. No, nothing's there." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And then I was like, "Right, I need to push now." And she was like, whoa, like not prepared or anything. And then she said, "I best examine you," and she did. And she was like, "Oh, you're right, you're 10 centimetres, and yeah, that's a baby's head, and she's coming." So it was all very quick
after
and
that. And what time was this?
This was, what time did we get to the hospital?
So you sort of woke up around 3 a.m.
3 a.m. And you probably went to the hospital about
8:30?
Yeah.
9ish?
8:30. 5 to 9.
I think I remember you saying that she was delivered within like half an hour,
less than half an hour
of you being at the hospital.
About 25 minutes of me arriving to the hospital, and then she was born.
She was born about 25 past 9?
Yeah, that's right. Oh,
yeah,
good you.
I've
good memory.
Look at me.
25 past 9 she was born.
3 years ago, still remember
I know, yeah. But yeah, the midwife, bless her, she wasn't prepared at all. So the emergency buzzers when my waters didn't break, as she soon found out, as she was covered. And Lila came out on a water slide.
I love it in that moment. He'd have turned around and gone, "Told you so."
Told you. Well,
told you they'd not gone.
She didn't believe me, so I was like, "Oops."
Proved it.
Yeah.
Proved it.
So yeah, a bit of a rush because she was on her own. She didn't have any equipment out, didn't have any gloves or anything on, and Lila was there. She
and
was
you just
born.
hit her in the face.
Very quick, yeah, slapped with the baby. So yeah, I mean, like I say, it was probably, the best way you could have a quick delivery and birth, really. So yeah, that was good. The only thing was that I tore.
Maybe because you come out so quick.
Very quickly, yeah. So they said they thought it was like a 3rd-degree tear. So the doctors came in and examined me and said I had to go to theatre, which was fine because I was knackered at this point. So I just fell asleep. Like, they took me to theatre. They put
have a nice little nap.
I know,
that,
yeah. They put a spinal block in so they could do
Yeah.
some suturing because they did think it was a 3rd-degree tear, but actually when they got in there and examined me properly, it was at 2nd degree.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was flat out, fast asleep, couldn't feel anything. Catheter in afterwards, and then went to meet little one. So very lucky. The only part that I did find hard was after with feeding.
Yeah.
So, as you mentioned with yours as well, my plan was to try and breastfeed. I really wanted to try. Didn't really think about formula feeding because I thought if it's if it's there in the house, it's too easy to transition. We did have some that I was very kindly given from a colleague, so that was hidden away. But I was adamant that I wanted to try breastfeeding, but really struggled with that from get-go, really. The latch wasn't great. It was so hot at the time I'd given birth. It was like 30 degrees.
Yeah, we had a heat wave, didn't we?
Yeah, then on the ward, they're not allowed to have the windows open because of the babies, and you're not allowed a fan because of the babies. And I was like, it was just hot and sweaty and struggled.
Yeah.
So we stayed in, I think we just stayed in for one night. Stayed in for one night because of the monitoring after I had spinal. And in the morning I fed her once on my own without assistance. And they were like, "Oh, great, that's fine, you can go home now." Yeah. So obviously I just jumped at the chance because I wanted to be home with my family.
I don't know whether it was the same for you, but especially in the hospital setting, some people take to it straight away. Yeah. But I think some people who do struggle to breastfeed, I didn't find the hospital the most conducive place to do so because if you haven't got someone like watching you, you feel, like you say, you feel hot, you feel bothered, you're not completely relaxed in yourself because you're not in your own environment. So I always thought that was a part of my journey, and it's the same for anyone, I think.
Yeah. So I was hoping, get home, like you say, in your own environment, relax, nobody watching you, and we could just get on with it. But again, I still really struggled with it, but I really struggled mentally with the fact that I couldn't do it. And Richard luckily saw this, and
he sort of stepped in, didn't he?
He stepped in, and he was really good. He contacted his sister, because we had no idea, we never had a baby before, about formula. He went out and bought formula, he bought a prep machine, he bought everything, and just said, let's just give her a bottle and see.
Yeah.
So we did, give her the bottle, and the first bottle, like, I can still remember it now, I just remember looking at her, and she was so content. And she was being fed. And Richard was like, "See, look at the smile on your face and the smile on her face.
Takes the pressure off you.
Massively.
She's happy."
Yeah, because it just got to the point, exactly. It got to the point where I was dreading, like I was clock watching and I was dreading it coming up to the next feed. It's like, oh God, we're going to have to go through it all again. And I get frustrated. And see, she's hungry, so she was getting frustrated. And it was it's just not how it's meant to be. Like, it's meant to be,
and you've got
the
enough
most
pressure
natural thing.
being a new parent.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think it's about day 4 that I stopped feeding and went on to the bottle. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't look back after that first bottle. Like, it was so lovely, and to watch Richard to be able to feed her and have some time with her as well.
It's a good bonding experience
definitely.
for dads and babies as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So and then from then on, she's now 3.
And a terror.
And a little terror. Yeah, that's it. She is terrible. I was going to say terrible twos, but she's still going through them now. She's a three-nager. Yeah, she is a three-nager and a troublesome one. No, she's absolutely beautiful. And obviously after what we'll go through next, she's our everything, and she's massively helped through the past year. So yeah, that's our little Lila.
So I think we'll probably cover this on another episode, is maybe how children like first children or even second or whatever can influence your sort of grieving process as well when you experience loss, because I think someone who loses a child like their first child maybe has a different focus and coping mechanisms than somebody who's got a small child at home and then experienced loss. So we maybe could touch on that in a different episode. But
absolutely.
Fast forward to, when did you find out you was pregnant?
About November
22?
You're good
you know
with your dates, you are.
I am brilliant. And do you know why I remember that?
Why?
Is because my daughter was born in February 23.
Yeah.
And we had quite an early baby shower.
Yes.
For me.
We did, yeah.
And you were drinking. Or you weren't drinking.
Well, when was your baby shower?
We went on that spa weekend and you were drinking. And then like a few days later, was it like my baby shower and you weren't? So, and then we were like, when you announced it, we were like, but she went on that spa weekend with us and she was drinking a right neck full of Prosecco.
I obviously didn't know I was pregnant then, Jodie.
Of course, yeah. No, caveat to that. I must add to that. She didn't know she was pregnant at this stage. So we were like, you must have found out in between that spa weekend with the girls.
Yeah.
And when the baby
was that,
shower.
like October?
It was November.
The spa day was November? Yeah, because it was towards the end of November that I found out, I think.
Yeah, because my baby shower was in November, I think. Okay. And that's the reason why it's stuck in my head, because I remember questioning, because you announced at Christmas.
Yeah, like Christmas Eve.
And and how many weeks pregnant were you there?
We were probably a little bit earlier.
You were a bit shy of 12, yeah.
Probably about 10 or 11 weeks, but we'd had an early scan, so I was like, we'll have to tell people at Christmas.
So your second pregnancy, planned, unplanned?
Planned.
Happened quite quickly? Yeah,
again, very lucky. Didn't have any troubles with conception or anything like that. So planned pregnancy. We said that we always wanted to have another child. Very lucky, pregnant quickly. I kind of knew this point that I was pregnant, because I was like,
you could just tell.
You just tell, you just know, and I was like,
well, you've been through it once before, so you'll understand the process a little bit more, and the feelings that you're having. And...
so we had a friend's wedding coming up, so after all our little... We had quite a lot going on that month, obviously, but we had a friend's wedding coming up, and I was like, well, I know I'm pregnant, but we've not done the official pregnancy test. So Richard, I felt I was pregnant.
Yeah, you sort of knew in your bones that you were pregnant.
And then I was like, right, we've got this wedding coming up. We'd planned a babysitter. I think Mum or someone was having Lila. We were staying over, so I was like, it's going to be a big drinking session.
Yeah, right, binge session.
I was like, I need to know if I'm pregnant, because if I don't confirm that I'm pregnant, then I'll probably be like, can I have a drink? Yeah. But if I see that test and that blue line that says I'm pregnant, obviously I'm not going to drink. But it was all like a planned meal. We knew there was obviously going to be alcohol. I think I was having a fillet steak that was rare, which you shouldn't have when you're pregnant. So I was getting myself all in a fluster. I was like, right, Rich, I'm just going to have to go and take a test so I can tell you that I'm pregnant. And then just give him the test, because I was like, well, I know I'm pregnant, so you can look at it.
Confirm,
just dead chill, nothing you know, some people do all these big pregnancy things with their partners, and I was just like...
My husband came home, and I just went, oh, I've got something to tell you, and just flicked
the stick
and I
at
did it
him.
while he was at work, and I just flicked this stick at him, and he was like, what?
Oh. Yeah, exactly.
It was very
Well, that's
casual.
what we were like. Downstairs on the sofa, I went upstairs, did this pregnancy test, brought him the little stick down, said, there you are, you have a look at that, I already know the answer. And he was like, oh, bloody hell, we're pregnant again. So, and we were like, oh, like, obviously it was planned, we're very happy, but it just kind of was like, oh, shit. We're going to have 2 children. So, obviously the next day was this wedding, so I had to, like, sneakily pretend I was drinking but not drink. So I was carried a glass of Prosecco around all day.
All day. I was about to say, didn't Richard get rat-arsed because you were playing him with your alcohol?
I did just keep swapping our wine glasses over.
So it looked like
I was drinking, and then he'd have to drink it, so he probably drank for both of us, but it was fine. It was fine. We managed to get away with it.
Yeah.
And then, again, smooth pregnancy. We had a private scan, like you said, just before Christmas, so we could announce that we were pregnant. Mm-hmm. Everything was fine. We had the hospital 12-week scan as well. Everything was fine. And then we told everyone as well at that point. I think you just take it for granted that when you get to your 12-week scan,
and then you're 20.
Both. That you're like, oh, I've had a scan, everything's fine. Had all the anomaly tests that
and all that
you
get
given. Everything come back clear, low risk. It's like great. 20-week scan. So we had our 20-week scan. We found out it was a girl. Mm-hmm. So we were having another little girl, which was great. And then we had a holiday booked. Mm. So we went on holiday with the 3 of us abroad. On a plane. I can't remember where we went. Fuerteventura. Mm-hmm. We went on holiday, had a lovely holiday until the ending of the holiday. So we got to the airport, it was delayed. Delayed for like 6 hours. He just kept telling us delay, until they then said cancelled. And it was like late at night at this point. Obviously we'd got little Lila that wasn't even 2.
She's coming up for 2.
Coming up for 2, yeah, of course. Coming up for 2, so she was tired.
You need me on my dates, don't you? Dates and times.
I'm terrible. My memory is absolutely shocking. So it was just very traumatic end to the holiday. Lots of delays. Flight got cancelled. We then got sent back to another hotel, which was right next door to the hotel that we'd just come from. So it was like an hour and a bit coach journey. So a lot of coach journeys. With a little baby that was tired and screaming, and it's hot, and I'm pregnant, and it was just a nightmare. So then get to the hotel to say that they wouldn't provide us with a cot for our baby to sleep in.
Oh my god.
So I just completely broke down. Everyone was like, oh my god, this lady's pregnant, flapping around me, and I was just like, I can't believe that you're saying that you're not going to give my child a cot.
What was the reason behind that?
I don't know, because it was a family hotel, so it was awful, and we chose never to bed share with our daughter.
Yeah.
Probably because of my history in A&E. I'd seen a lot of things go wrong. Not saying it's obviously everybody's choice.
Yeah, it's either you're not anti it, but it's just not something that you've done yourself.
It's just not something that I felt comfortable with, especially pregnant.
We've been like that.
So I ended up, by the time we got back to the hotel, it was probably nearly midnight. Little one so tired, screaming the place down. So I actually phoned the TUI line and said, can you listen to that? Because you've caused this because you won't provide our daughter with a bed, and I'm pregnant and I've got put up with this, and it was just a nightmare. We finally managed to get her to sleep on our bed, but obviously we didn't want to both of us sleep in the bed with her and being pregnant, so we ended up barricading all around the bed with pillows and everything, because I was petrified of her falling out. And it's when you're abroad, it's always tile floors, isn't it? Yeah. So we padded out, got all the extra blankets and the pillows out of the cupboard, padded around her bed. Hardly slept that night because I was just so worried about falling out or rolling onto her or something. Poor Richard had to sleep on the sofa. So we didn't have any sleep. Got up. Can you hear that music in the background?
It's the ice cream man.
I love ice cream man. I'm thinking, am I going mad or am I hearing things?
I'm convinced it's our ice cream man, which is devastating because we're not going to be able to get there in time.
It's alright, we're having a takeaway, so don't worry.
Yeah, pizza's on its way, guys.
Right. Yeah, where were we? Hardly slept. Next morning, woke up, because obviously we'd got an update saying that our flight was at this time, got to the bloody airport again for them to say, oh no, it's been delayed again.
It's kidding.
So, nightmare. We've got no money, we've got no food, because obviously we always go on holiday with X amount of money, because
Yeah.
plan on how it was all inclusive, the place that we were at, so we just only had a small bit of spending money, so we've got no money, like no snacks, nothing like Lila and everything.
Yeah.
So, and they give us like a ridiculous amount of money for a token,
which gives you like a ham sandwich with no butter on, and it's
pathetic. Yeah. So it was
Usually.
just awful. By the time we got onto the plane, again, Lila was tired, nobody had slept. I'd also, prior to getting to the airport, was being sick on the coach, because I'm not very good with travelling anyway.
No,
and we were on the back of this tiny little bus thing that was like bouncing up and down all the roads. I'm throwing up in nappy sacks because it was the only thing that we had. Richard,
I know
was
it's
quite
not
impressed.
funny at the
It's
time,
not,
but it sounds
no, it's
real.
not funny. But now looking back on it,
It sounds quite funny.
It was, yeah. Lila's again screaming. Richard's trying to settle Lila down. I'm throwing up in a bag. It was just awful.
Yeah.
So got to the airport, delayed again. Finally got on the plane. Lila screamed the whole journey.
Oh.
Like
Parents' worst nightmare.
Oh, take off to landing. She screamed, but she was that stressed and that upset. She was kicking, she was biting, she was slapping, she's not like that at all. But she was so tired, so hot, so bothered. Probably, I mean, obviously we did feed her, but hungry, like everything it was just so abnormal for her. And obviously at that age they don't have their own seat. You have to sit them on your lap.
Oh, yeah.
So Richard took her because he didn't want her sat on me, hitting me when I'm pregnant. So I just had to watch poor Richard be absolutely battered by this toddler. Like, honestly, it was awful.
Does sound like worst nightmare on like travel, doesn't it?
Yeah, we had loads of people come in to like try and help and be like, oh, don't worry, like they were lovely. We actually had, I can't remember his name, but we had one guy that followed us from, he must have been in a hotel near us or the same hotel, and he had kids himself and he was on holiday, and he was amazing with Lila. Like, he kept going to the shop and buying a little Kinder eggs, and he'd be like, I've got some sweets, give us some of my sweets. He was, and he kept,
sweet.
He was really sweet, and he kept coming from where he was sat on the plane down to her to like make sure that I was okay, make sure that she was okay and Richard was okay. And people were trying to look after us, but I was just like an emotional, hormonal wreck.
Not surprised.
Yeah, it was horrific. So she fell asleep about 5 minutes before we landed, or as we landed, on me. So then we had to carry her all the way through, and we were just exhausted. Absolutely
mentally
exhausted.
And physically
yeah.
exhausted.
And I was actually due back at work probably on the day we got home or the day after we got home. So I had to phone in work and cancel that because we had shifts booked in for A&E. So that was another stress. And then after we got back, I think I went straight into night shifts then in A&E. So straight into night shifts. So tired. Still tired.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a bit of like a cold, a bit nasally. Probably we thought it was just from like the air conditioning or whatever on the aeroplane. Like germs just spread, don't they? So Richard was like, "You've had an awful time. End to your holiday. You're pregnant. Just phone in. You're not going in work."
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, you're probably right. Probably time to think of myself for once," because I never did at that point.
Yeah, you always put it everybody else.
I did,
first
yeah.
And...
So I did. I phoned in sick and had the week off, which was just as well, really. So, having the week off on, I think it was a Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I was 22 weeks and 1 day pregnant at this point.
Yeah.
Been for a shower, usual nighttime routine, put Little into bed, go for a shower, get pyjamas, go downstairs for a chill. So I did, and as I was getting my pyjamas on, I thought, oh, God, not dried myself very well, like I'm a bit wet here, so I thought, best get changed, what you like, rushing.
Think nothing of it.
Didn't think anything of it, just thought not dried myself properly. So changed pyjamas, underwear, put new set on, and then went downstairs to Richard, and he was in the kitchen, he's probably making a drink, so I was like, went to the kitchen, and I just remember standing there and like grabbing between my legs because I felt wet again.
Right.
Richard was like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh.
A bit like you've peed yourself and you're not meant to.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh. And he's like, what's the matter? And I was like, well, I don't know if I've just like wet myself or something's wrong.
Yeah.
And he was like, obviously, you wouldn't think the worst. He was like, don't be daft, you just pissed your nicks.
Yeah.
Like, trying to make a joke of it. And I was like, no, like, I've never pissed my nicks before, Richard.
Yeah,
I've never had problems with incontinence after pregnancy or anything like that. So I was like, oh no, this is weird. And I'm getting panicked now. So back upstairs, changed my pyjamas again, third pair of pyjamas and underwear. Sat on the sofa and Richard's like, just calm down, just relax, it's fine. Let's just see what happens. So I sat on the sofa with my legs up, thinking, gravity will help and all that. With my legs up on the sofa, my legs crossed because I'm like absolutely petrified already. Yeah. Can't relax, can't concentrate on whatever we were watching on the TV. And I could just, every time I slightly move, just trying to reposition yourself, get yourself it just felt like fluid was just coming out. So I was like, oh, bloody hell. So going to the toilet, and I was like, well, if it was like wee, like I'd be able to go for a wee.
Yeah.
But I couldn't go for a wee because there was nothing there.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is odd. So anyway, I went and got some sanitary towels because that's all I had at the time that I'd not used, obviously, because I was pregnant. Put them in and thought, right, I can monitor it at least.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't settle. So I thought, Richard is like, right, ring them, see what they say. So phoned them, told them what had happened.
Which you should always do.
Absolutely, yeah. Always, anything.
Ever worried about anything, however stupid it is, or you feel it is, not how stupid it is, however stupid you feel you're being, which is totally wrong, you just get it checked
Well, and I
out.
think that was part of it, because, like, being a nurse, I was like,
I don't want to bother
don't want to be that person that just rings every time, like, something doesn't feel right or whatever. Yeah. And I was actually texting, at the time, I was texting two of my work colleagues that are, like, really close friends anyway.
But they work in A&E.
They also work in A&E
they're, like,
with me.
medically trained as well.
So I was like, oh, hold that conversation, girls. I don't know if I've just wet myself or my waters have broke. And obviously, being the medical professions they are, they were like, go to the hospital now, Nicole. So I was like, oh no, don't want to mother anyone. But anyway, I phoned them, spoke to a midwife, and I told her what had happened. And her theory was that because I'd been in the shower, I'd sucked up water. I can laugh now.
Like, you've not been in the bath, which you can sort of understand from a gravity perspective that might happen in the bath, but has she ever had a shower before?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what she thought I was doing in the shower. But,
well, yeah.
Or that I've got a bloody Henry Hoover vagina. Well, so obviously I was like, no. So she said, see how you get on. It was quite late at night at this point. She was like, go to bed as normal. And then, where we are, just ring us back if you need to. So I was like, oh, whatever. I was really annoyed. So I was just like, oh, fine. Dead upset. And I was like crying to her on the phone. Obviously, it's not normal. It's completely different to my previous pregnancy. My waters didn't break with my previous pregnancy.
And your instinct kicks in as well. Yeah. You must have known
and I've never wet myself.
Something wasn't right.
Yeah. So anyway, we tried to carry on watching telly, just to try and, relax before we went to bed. But I was just getting myself, like, hysterical. I was in a right state. Every time I moved, I could feel more fluid loss. I went to the toilet, like, it didn't look like urine. It's gross, but it didn't smell like urine. So I ended up phoning them back, and a different lady answered the phone. And I said, like, please, you need to believe me. Like, I'm a nurse. I know what urine looks and smells like. This isn't urine. It's not normal.
Yeah.
Can I come in so you can examine me? Because obviously they can't tell over the phone.
No.
I get that, it's too early, that my waters would break, but obviously this wasn't a normal situation. So I did. I went in on my own because the little girl was in bed.
Yeah.
And we were hoping that they were just like, yeah, you've just wet yourself, like, it's fine. So I went in on my own. It's probably about 10 o'clock at night. Saw the midwife that originally answered the phone, and straight away she said, like, go to the bathroom, take your pad off, put a new one in, and leave it on the side so I can examine it.
Yeah.
So as soon as she came in and she saw it, she was like, I'm so sorry, like, you are right, your waters have broke.
Yeah.
There's just like a distinctive smell. It's really gross, but a distinctive smell to
but if
waters.
that's how you identify it, that's how you identify it.
So they went and got the doctor to quickly come and examine me, and go from there. So I was in a complete state at this point. Doctors examined me and again confirmed that it was definitely my waters, but said that my cervix was still long and closed.
Closed, yeah. Which is a good sign.
Which is a positive sign.
Yeah.
They listened in to check baby, and she was fine. She still had a really strong heartbeat. She was still wiggling around. And he said that, like, they went through all the history, like, had I been unwell, anything that could have caused this. They did my blood tests, all observations and everything, and there was no sign of infection. All my bloods at this point came back normal. There was no infection. They didn't think, obviously I had a bit of a cold, but, like, they didn't think it was that. They did a COVID test because obviously COVID was still being spoke about. Yeah. That was negative, so they didn't have an explanation. And I just remember straight after this doctor examined me saying, like, oh, I'm really sorry your waters broke. The next words were, but don't worry, it might not happen in your next pregnancy. And that really hit me, because I was like, you've just told me my baby's still alive, and yet you're talking about her as if she's not. And at this point, obviously, we were just hopeful that we could continue the pregnancy if that's possible.
Because there's things that you can do, even when your waters break, if the baby is healthy.
Yeah.
That's my understanding and my very limited knowledge, that there's things that they can do, because your waters replenish, right?
Yes. So
in theory.
Yeah, that's what they said, is that your waters, so obviously
constantly.
The baby's surrounded in the waters, the baby drinks that fluid, it then processes through the baby's body, and the baby would then urinate that fluid back out, and then it's just like a recycle, like that. So that was the hope, that there was still a little bit of fluid there, that she would drink past water and just keep replacing more.
Replenishing it,
so, I spoke to Richard, completely heartbroken, devastated, couldn't stop crying, didn't know what to think. Both of us were like Googling things, like to see if we could find out more information rather than waiting for the doctors. And there was some like success stories out there about people that's waters have broke. They call it PROM, so preterm premature rupture of the membranes. So I was admitted to hospital. They put me on antibiotics straight away, just as like precautionary, even though I hadn't got an infection. There was now like a pathway for infection to go up, because like that membrane of your was now broke, so infection could get to the baby.
Because he said that to me when my waters break. So I think anyone who breaks the waters and doesn't go into immediate labour, the infection risk goes higher, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So I was then transferred up onto the, I don't know, maternity ward or the labour ward. They expected that I would go into labour, because like that's the body's natural process, that your waters break and you go into labour. So that was expected, but I didn't go into labour, not for a while anyway. So onto a ward on antibiotics, regular monitoring of myself and baby, on my own, obviously, because Richard was at home with the little one. So it was next morning, hardly slept.
So you're talking Thursday morning now. So you'd gone in on Wednesday night.
So coming into the Thursday morning, obviously didn't sleep. Ringing people in the morning, like family, to try and help with arrangements for Lila, so Richard could come and be with me, because we were going to do scans and lots of other tests on baby, and obviously a lot of conversations needed to be had about going forward and what to expect. So luckily we're very good. My family helped look after Lila. Richard came into hospital and we had all these conversations. So this was just at our local hospital. So spoke to the consultants there. We had scans to check like fluid levels that day as well, and there just wasn't any fluid there at this point. That day that Richard did come, because I was like, when we read into stories, like we read like obviously about having bed rest to try and like lay flat so the gravity wouldn't like help lose water. So, but the doctors weren't
telling you any of this.
Yeah, they didn't tell me like anything like this, and I said like, oh, should I be on bed rest? Should I not be moving? Like, what do I do if I need to go to the toilet? Because obviously every time you get up, I lost water. So I was like trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. They told me that I still needed to be mobile, because obviously like otherwise I might end up with like DVTs in your legs and all things like that. So I just tried to stay like as flat and as still as possible until I really needed to go to the toilet. But obviously that's inevitable. You have to go to the bathroom at some point, because I was trying to drink loads of fluid as well to see if that helped. I think I was just doing anything for like hope at this point, like drink loads of water,
anything that might...
don't move. So I remember Richard being there, and I was like, oh, I've got to go to the toilet. And I remember standing up and just like the biggest gush of water, like completely flooded everything, like all over the floor, all over the pads. Richard was like, oh my God. And like, obviously I was just hysterical, because I was just like, oh, there's nothing that I can do to stop this. This is just what's going to happen. So then we had the scan, which then showed that there was no fluid around her at all. So then it was a case of discussing what that meant and what the outcome would be for baby. So blood results had come back at this point as well, which showed I had severe infection, and they treated me as septic, then they said that I didn't have an infection, which caused my waters to break. That was just spontaneous.
You've developed that
but I've developed now an infection because
Afterwards.
there's a passage, the
Yeah.
membranes aren't there anymore. So they called it like an infected womb. So the baby was in like an infected womb.
Yeah.
So I was put on, well, should have been put on triple therapy antibiotics, but I was only given 2 at this local hospital. And then we had to have all the conversations with the consultants. So for me...
About what if.
Yeah. So the gynae consultants for me as mum, but then also all the neonatal consultants for baby. Because obviously I was only 22 weeks pregnant at this point, the outcome for baby, if she was going to be born soon, wasn't positive.
Yeah.
They give us all the statistics and everything, and the hospital that we were at the time didn't deal with premature babies under 27 weeks. So, but obviously we'd looked into things online and read all about these different stories, and that there is different hospitals that provide what we call level 3 care, so for like neonatal babies, and it was from 22 weeks that they could start intervention if the baby was born.
Yeah. Which you were over that, so it's a possibility.
So I was over that at this point, so there's possibility. So we said to the consultant, because he just kept discussing that if I went into labour, which they were obviously expecting me to go into labour, that baby might be born and not have a heartbeat or be breathing, and they would just give me what they call comfort care. So obviously just unfortunately let the baby die naturally. But that wasn't an option for us. Like, obviously as a parent...
Not if there's an alternative.
Yeah, you're going to do absolutely everything you could to save our baby, our daughter. So we asked the consultant to ring another hospital to just have that conversation, and her initial response was, well, basically there's no point because they won't accept you. So I said, no, I'm sorry, but you have to make that call because it's the only thing we can do as parents is ask. So she did. She went and made that phone call and came back and said yes, they would accept you. It was all very quick by this point.
And she wasn't even going to make that call, but you had to push for
no,
that.
so we pushed and pushed. So it'd be a few hours since she got through, because obviously the process of getting through to the other hospital and all the discussions and notes and everything. So Richard had actually gone home at this point to see to our daughter, because we were trying to keep it as normal as possible without mummy being there. So Richard had gone home, I was on the ward, and they came to me and said, this other hospital has accepted you. We can transfer you now while you're stable and not in active labour.
Yeah.
So I was like, fine. They called an ambulance. Very lucky that an ambulance came very quickly, and I was whisked away within less than an hour after this decision. So got examined to make sure that I wasn't in labour. Cervix was still long and closed. I was already on all these antibiotics. Wasn't too bad in myself at this point. So off I went to another hospital, but this hospital was like an hour and 40 minutes away. So it was a big decision to move so far away from family. I remember ringing Richard oh my God, what do I do? Because I'm so far away from anyone. I'm on my own. Obviously he's got Lila, but it was all about the baby. So off we went.
And you just do it. You're faced with these situations, and everything seems to snowball so quickly. The choices seem to go out of your hands, and you just have to adapt,
absolutely.
don't you, and go with it.
Yeah, and I just remember feeling like when you're a patient in hospital, even if you're a nurse, I was so far out of my depth because I'm not in maternity or neonatals or anything. I had no idea. I'm just a patient at this point, being told, and obviously other than I was pushing and Googling stuff, and I remember thinking, oh God, is this a good hospital? Should I be looking into it? Should I go here or should I stay here? And I've got 2 friends that one of them's a midwife and one of them's a NICU nurse.
Right.
And I remember writing them a message, but I just didn't know what to say because I don't even think they knew at this point that I was in hospital.
Yeah. And how do you explain the last sort of 48, 48 hours?
In a quick message before I get whisked away in an ambulance. And I actually never managed to message them because the ambulance just came. So I just went with it, hoping that they would know best, and went to this hospital. So I arrived at the hospital, the same thing, check you in, do all your observations, bloods, antibiotics and everything. And I was in a labour room because they were expecting me to go into labour.
Yeah.
So the most uncomfortable bed, like these beds that you can separate and like take the bottoms off and all that, and they wanted me to sleep on that because they're like, oh, you're going to go into labour, and I'm like, bloody hell.
Well,
so again, another
prevent this.
I know, another very difficult night of sleep. Richard came straight away the next day. Again, we had to have all these horrible talks with all the consultants there about expecting the worst and what decisions we would make if that happened. Obviously, they were just expecting me to go into labour, as that's a natural course to follow, but I still hadn't gone into labour.
This was at the weekend, or was it about Friday?
So I got transferred
you sort of
Friday.
Your waters broke like Wednesday night. You went into hospital that night.
So this would have been Friday.
Yeah, so
Friday
you got transferred
night.
Quite quickly in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So they were just doing monitoring. Because I hadn't gone into labour, they then decided to move me off the labour ward and onto like the antenatal ward, even though I hadn't given birth.
Yeah.
Went there for just more observation and everything. Over the weekend, like I had a bit of back pain, but I always had back pain in both my pregnancies. That was only my ever thing that I had.
Yeah, it wasn't abnormal.
So it wasn't abnormal for me, and like I wasn't requiring strong pain relief or anything. And all my bloods, like amazingly, like didn't get critically unwell with sepsis, because my bloods did go quite bad, and like we did actually have to have a conversation with the consultants about my care. And I remember them saying to Richard like that they would take the decision away if I become so unwell that I ended up in intensive care. They would save my life over the baby's life. And I couldn't accept that, because obviously mother's instinct is no, we save the baby, like doesn't matter, you do everything for the baby. But they would take that decision away because they couldn't lose both of us. So that was really hard, and obviously I can't imagine how hard that would be for Richard to hear, knowing that he's potentially could lose both of us. But got over that, managed to fight sepsis. My bloods all came like back down to a more normal range that they
manageable.
could send me home on oral antibiotics rather than the IV antibiotics. So that was positive. There was no water left at all at this point. I wasn't losing any water at this point. So we were seen by a consultant on the Sunday night now. So skipping a few days because we were just waiting around in hospital.
Yeah.
Sunday night comes, the consultant comes. So before Richard goes home, he came to do like a bedside scan to check. And obviously check the baby. I had regular heartbeat checking of baby, which was always really strong. Couldn't really feel her moving as much now, but they said that's because there's no water there, there's no like free space for her to move. She's a little bit squished, that you might not feel her. And I always had a anterior placenta, so my placenta was at the front, so it was difficult to feel movements anyway. And we'd only just started feeling movements, to be honest, before all this happened anyway. So they did the checks and the scan and said, there's no fluid there, she's still strong, she's got a strong heartbeat. And he went in to say that you haven't gone into labour, so this might be the rest of your pregnancy now. You might go full term without going into labour. That is a possibility, and if that is the case, then we're looking at sending you home now, because you're more at risk staying in a hospital to pick up any more infections than you would be going into your home. And I was like, oh my god, no, I was ready to like live in hospital for the next however many months.
You'd come to terms with the fact that if that's like, something that's got to be done, it's got to be done.
That's got to be done, because I was like, I just felt safer in hospital, obviously, in case I did go into labour.
It was more if you went into labour, you'd close by.
I'm close by, and everyone's there, and obviously I couldn't imagine doing that at home in front of Richard and like our other daughter. So I was like, oh god, like it put a bit of...
And the fact that the hospital's not 5 minutes away, it's like over an hour and a half away, would factor into the decision if they were a unit that would intervene at that early age.
Exactly, So this hospital that I was at specialised in extreme preterm babies from 22 weeks. So this is why I was transferred to this hospital. So it got to the point they were like, oh, we're going to send you home tomorrow. And I was just like, oh my god. So that like freaked me out a little bit. So I was in a bit of a tears and said to Richard, and he's just like, well, let's just see what happens overnight, see what happens tomorrow. Like if that's the case, we'll do it, and we'll manage. And they said that I'd have like regular scans like twice a week at the hospital, and like be really closely monitored throughout the whole of my pregnancy now, and be like not on bed rest, but like obviously I wouldn't be going back to work, wouldn't be doing too much, not exerting myself, and that would be the rest of my pregnancy. So we were like, okay, but obviously the downside of that is that there's no fluid, there's not much space for her, so obviously the fluid around the baby when they're growing in your womb helps with like lung development. It gives them the space for the lungs to expand. Because I didn't have that, they said that she might be born with a lung disease.
Okay.
And she might be deformed because there's not much fluid around her for her to grow. So we said like she might come out and she might have like a squished nose, or you know, some abnormality, something might not have grown as it should. But at this point, I think we were just like, but if our daughter's alive, then we'll manage. Because like
the
alternative just wasn't thinkable. So Richard went home to see Lila so he could come back the next day if I was going to be discharged, so he could bring me home. So off he went. I always seemed to get myself in a bit of a state when Richard went, because he was so far away. I couldn't help but think, God, if I go into labour, like, he's got such a long drive to come, like, he might not be here, he might miss it. I was obviously worried about Richard, like, having to tell him that I'm in labour, and
him rushing.
Drive, and it was just a lot. So I always seemed to be like a bit panicky when he left, but this night was different. I was like, oh, his back pain's getting worse, and couldn't get comfortable, and I phoned Richard and said, like, you know, I don't know if something's wrong, and he was like, well, just try and relax, have a shower, get in bed. Like, I'd actually paid for the TV to work in the hospital. It's like, put a programme on. He brought me some chocolate, 'cause it was like near Easter time. I'm obsessed with Easter eggs. So he brought me chocolate, and he's like, have your chocolate, just try and relax, like, everything's going to be okay. Kept speaking to like the staff and said like I was in a lot of pain, like I was asking for pain relief now because I was in pain.
Which is an indicator, isn't it, when you're not coping with the pain.
So they got the doctors to come back and examine me, because it felt like an elastic band around my stomach. It felt like a contraction. Obviously I've been in labour before, I know what a contraction felt like, and I kept feeling like I was having a tightening from my back around my front. So I asked them to come and examine me, and they were like, no, you're not in labour. Like, they did an internal examination and said, like, my cervix was still long and closed. You're not in labour. And I was just like, well, can you not feel that? Because, like, I could see my stomach contracting. Yeah. And I was like, can you not see that? And they were just, you know, a bit blasé about it. And she was like, well, if you're saying you're in pain, like, I can prescribe you pethidine, because I was on paracetamol and codeine at this point. And I was like, well, if you're telling me I'm not in labour, I ain't going to go for the, you know, for the whole lot and go for pethidine. So I said no. Like, I'd prefer to save it for when I was actually in labour, according to her. So just tried to carry on, tried to sleep, couldn't, showered, or agony. It got to the point that I was rolling around on the bed in so much pain. And obviously it was probably worse because mentally I was struggling, like, thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen?
And so that probably, no support network there either.
Yeah, and I was in a side room on my own, like, there was nobody came in unless you buzzed, kind of thing. So
you just left it to you.
Yeah, and I felt like I was being that annoying patient that kept buzzing.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, come and check me, I'm in pain. Oh, it's 9 o'clock, I'm due my pain relief, because I was in agony.
Yeah.
So I, like, monitored everything. So I called them in. I was rolling around in pain, and then I just felt something below, and I was like, I know this isn't right.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to look because I was petrified, so I called them, and I was like crying my eyes out, screaming. I was like, please, will someone just help me? Like, I'm in so much pain. And
like,
I said,
believe me when I say that something's not right.
I said, and now I think that, like, I'm passing blood.
Yeah.
So she was like, oh, I'm going to have a look. So she took my pad, and there was something there, because she was a bit like, oh, God, right, I'm going to have to go and get someone, like, don't move, basically. Yeah. So off she went, and then the next thing, like, it was all go. They were like, get into a chair, even though it was like clots of blood that I was passing at this point. Get you into a chair. I was like, I couldn't sit down. I was in so much pain. I was screaming, and they're all, like, I don't get upset. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
I just remember them all looking at me, like, as if they were feeling sorry for me, because they knew what was going to happen. And I remember giving them the phone and saying, ring Richard, like, because I knew I was in labour.
Yeah, you knew it was happening.
Yeah, so they whisked me back round to the labour ward, the same room that I started in. And they phoned Richard, and obviously that put him into mass panic. And then, because it was the middle of the night, this was, so he had to then get my brother back round to look after Lila, and then do this massive journey to us.
Well, which must have been horrible
for him, like not knowing what he's coming to. So they spoke to him, and I got into this room, and there was a few people there, and sorry.
Don't say sorry. Don't say sorry. Take your time.
The doctor, that didn't believe me the first time, came in and was like, oh, because it was literally less than an hour after she examined me saying I wasn't in labour.
Yeah.
She came back and she was like, oh God, like, I just remember looking between my legs and saying, Nicole, don't move. Whatever you do, don't move and don't push, because your baby's right there. And they hadn't got any of the team ready. So it was a big rush to get like the whole neonatal team there. So obviously when she was born, that they could then intubate her if she was alive. And then when all the team got there, they said, okay, like, it's time to deliver your baby now. And I just remember screaming.
Take a breath. Take a breath.
I've told this story so much, but not for so long.
I know.
I just remember screaming, saying, like, no, it can't be happening. But with one very small push, she was there, and it was like deadly silence while everyone was looking. And then the midwife that was with me, like, grabbed my hand and said, she's moving. And I could feel the tiny little legs kicking on my leg.
Yeah.
So they took her, and the whole team was there by this point. They took her.
They were ready.
They were ready, and because she was making some effort, they intubated her straight away.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I just wanted to see her.
Yeah.
So by this point, the consultant just arrived. He got called in, obviously, because it was middle of the night. There's no consultants on, but this needed a consultant. So the consultant came in, and I just remember him being like, "Let mummy see her. Let mummy see her." So he was like, just literally just giving birth. I've got things all over me, but I was like, I just want to see her. So they pulled her incubator over to me so I could see her, and obviously she had to be whisked away straight off to NICU. So he took my phone off me, bless him, and took loads of pictures of her, and took pictures of me like looking at her in the incubator, and then she was gone. Obviously in the best hands to go and have everything that she needed to do, but I just remember being like, oh my God, she's alive.
Yeah.
And they said, like, have you got a name for her? And obviously me and Richard, when we were actually on that holiday, I'd already decided on 2 names that we'd liked. Obviously we knew we were having a girl at this point, so we said Luna and also Willow for a first name. But then when I was in hospital, when I was laying like the bed before I actually delivered her, the moon was right outside my window.
Like a sign.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking like, oh, she's going to be called Luna because it's like a sign, like you say, it's like a sign. And I just remember thinking that if the worst did happen, because that's what we were expecting, that if she's called Luna, like obviously she'll resemble the moon, and we can always see the moon, and she can always see us.
Yeah.
So in my head, we hadn't had this discussion with Richard, but
it
was just her name.
Yeah, it was just.
And in mine, as soon as she said, "Have you got a name for her?" I was like, "Yeah, it's Luna Willow." So she had both. So after I delivered her and they'd taken her, I was then Richard. I'm worried about Richard. Like he's absolutely bombing it down the motorway to come to me. So I said, I need my phone. I need to ring Richard. Like in between delivering Luna and my placenta, I phoned Richard to say, like, look,
so you
I'm
hadn't
okay.
delivered your placenta.
Hadn't delivered my placenta. No. So I was like, I'm okay. Like I told him I have delivered her, but she's okay. I need you to slow down because he was like. It was upset, he was hysterical himself, and I knew that he'd be trying to race to get here.
And you wanted him there safely?
Yeah, I wanted him there safely, and I wanted him to pull over if he needed to, just have a minute to process everything and then come when, like, as quick as he could, but as safe as he could.
Good, yeah.
So I did that, let him go, and then obviously I had to deliver my placenta. And they given me, I can't remember, what did they give? Oh, they gave me an injection of I think it was magnesium before I delivered Luna to help with her lung development and her brain development. I can't remember if it's lung or brain, one or the other, for when she was delivered. But oh my God, did it make me feel unwell. It was like, I always get hot and flustered anyway. Yeah. But this was something else. Like, oh my
hot sweat
God.
kind of.
Yeah. This wave just came over me and it was awful. then I start, even though I'd delivered my placenta, I started again, like, with contractions and pain and, like, agony, and I was rolling around the bed, and I was like, oh. And they had to examine me again, and it was all, like, they had to remove a lot of blood clots, should we say.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of blood loss. And this was all before Richard had got there again.
Did you have any adverse effects from the delivery, as in yourself physically, like you did with when you had your first daughter?
Yeah.
You had a tear, and you had some care after that.
Yeah.
Was there any further care that you needed post-delivery?
No. The only thing that they had to give me was, I don't know if they had to give me they had to give me something, and I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it was just like medication for Luna, though, that they give me. But no, there was no tears, obviously, at this point, because she was so small.
Yeah.
It was just like I don't know if it was retained products or just like a lot of bleeding afterwards, that I did lose quite a lot of blood. But I didn't require a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
But I just had a lot of fluids, because after they removed all the blood clots, oh God, I felt so unwell, and I just thought it was that medication, but I could feel my heart rate slowing down.
Right.
That's how I sound weird, and I was like, my vision was going, and I was panicking.
I think it's a combination of
the
adrenaline, the shock,
and the blood loss, and that medication, and I was just like...
Your body's gone through not only a physical trauma, but a mental trauma as well at this stage.
Well, it felt as if I was dying, because I could feel my heart pounding and then slowing down, and I was freaking out. Yeah, it's probably panic attack as well. Yeah. And I was like shouting at the midwife, because she was doing notes somewhere, and she was like, "Oh, she's like, you don't look very well, Nicole." I was like, "No, I don't feel well." So she like plonked back, head down, and put blood pressure cuff, and like my blood pressure dropped, and called the doctors back in, and it was just like more fluids and all that really, that I was given. So Richard arrived at this point, but he didn't believe me when I told him that our daughter was alive. He thought that I'd just said that to get him here safely. So when he arrived at the hospital, the receptionist or whoever was on the desk in the middle of the night said, "Oh, she's in that room," and he was like, "Can someone tell me what's going on first?" Because he expected to walk into that room and me be holding our daughter and her not be here. And I could hear him outside, and I was like, "Well, somebody just go and get him and tell him it's okay." And I'm like shouting, like, "Richard, I'm okay, just come in." But he wouldn't, because he was petrified of what he was going to walk into. On the other
side of the door.
Yeah. So he walked in. They managed to persuade him just to come in. Said like, "No, she is alive, but she's in NICU. Like, we'll take you to her in a bit." And he walked in. I just remember him looking around. Obviously, it's not a nice room anyway, because like incubators, and obviously there was bloody stuff everywhere, like they hadn't tidied up and everything yet, and I was just lay on this bed, obviously not feeling well at all, and in a complete state. And I just remember saying to him, "I'm sorry," and he was like, "What are you saying sorry for?" And I was like, "But you weren't here."
Yeah.
Like, and I think,
it's not like I couldn't.
No,
like I couldn't stop it, or
yeah. Looking back, it probably was the best thing that he wasn't there.
Yeah. To
witness that, because I can't imagine watching someone going through that, not being able to help.
Yeah.
So it probably was the best thing that he wasn't there. But he got there in time, and then we fell asleep because we were knackered.
Yeah.
So I was absolutely drained. Obviously hadn't had any sleep because I was in agony. So I fell asleep, and they made him a little bed as well, and said like, "Come on, you need to get some rest. They need to do what they need to do in NICU, and then I'll ring them at whatever time." Yeah. And see.
Because you don't want to interfere either, because we had this situation where we didn't know what they were doing to our daughter.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't with her, we didn't know her condition, but they were like, "We will come to you when she's stable."
Yes.
So there's literally nothing you can do, and the worst thing you could do is you don't want to sit there and interfere when they've got stuff they need to do.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So we had a couple of hours sleep, and then woke up. The midwife gave us an update and said, that she was intubated, and she was doing really well, and it all sounded as positive as it could be, basically, at this point. So
just for the benefit of anyone listening, Luna was born at how many weeks and days?
So she was born at 23 weeks.
Yeah, bang on.
Yes, although
she was born on the Tuesday, wasn't she?
Yeah, the hospital documented that she was 22 plus 6. but that's because they got the dates wrong of my due date, which has all been confirmed later.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was officially born
at
23 weeks. Obviously, it was like 1:43 in the morning, so it was only just into the 23 weeks. But the weeks, days, hours, minutes really count for a premature baby, especially an extreme premature baby like Luna, because the statistics change so much in between the
percentage
weeks.
of success
survival,
and survival literally can change by the day, can't it?
Yeah, it's massive. So I was really adamant. I was like, no, she's 23 weeks, but they didn't have it until much later on down the line. And she was a really good weight for her age. She was like 560 grams, which is I think it's £1 1 ounce. So that's how people know about babies when they're born, don't they?
Yeah,
We're
they're
always
using
done in
pounds and ounces rather than grams.
Yeah, because she was so diddy, they do it in grams. And that was a really good weight for her weeks gestation. And the doctor actually said, like, oh, can we weigh her again, because he didn't believe that she was that weight for her gestational age.
Will go in her favour.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was that. We had to obviously phone round all our family to say that she was been born, but she was alive, that she was doing okay. So we got the update off her, and then before we went to view her, obviously I was pregnant, my breasts were on fire.
Yeah.
And the nurse, I didn't think this was even a possibility, nurse, whatever she was like, right, shall we try and get some of your colostrum? And I was like, what? Like
23 weeks.
23 weeks, these ain't going to have anything in them. And she was like, oh no, trust me, your body knows that you've delivered a baby.
Wow.
So I was like, well...
Which is surprising, because you just think...
Yeah.
Your body won't know that time.
No, yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, obviously I will do anything at this point. Obviously, previous pregnancy with Lila, I couldn't manage. I did do colostrum harvesting before she was born, but minimal amount, and then obviously wasn't successful with breastfeeding. So I was like, oh no, I'll do absolutely anything. I was so knackered. This amazing lady was like, if we can even get 1 mil, that is like everything to your daughter. So I was like, yeah,
it's like gold dust, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So I just let her do it. I just lay there. I was so knackered, so drained. Like, it was all just so much. I just lay there, and it was like she was milking a cow.
Yeah.
Richard was just like, wow, this is
One of the
different.
nurses did that with me. She was like, do you want me to help you? And I'm like, yeah.
I just lay there with my coffee and my piece of toast.
Yeah.
And she was just milking me.
Yeah, and I totally get it. I did exactly the same thing when I was like, I can't believe I've got another human being.
Yeah.
I feel completely undignified at the moment, but I actually...
It doesn't matter.
didn't care whatsoever.
No. So, yeah, she was amazing, this lady. She managed to get 10 mils.
Wow, what a
10
superhero.
syringes off both boobs at 23 weeks pregnant, and I was like, wow.
I'm so glad you did it.
Yeah, she was so impressed with herself. I actually have a picture of her on my phone. She was so proud of how many syringes she'd got. I think she told the whole ward and department.
I've just milked Nicole, I got 10 syringes.
Yeah, so obviously that was great. So she was like, right, let's go see Luna, and I'll show you where they have milking rooms in. That sounds awful, but milk rooms and milk fridges and freezers, because it's on NICU. Show you where
just
milk. Show you where the milk room is. And we have to how we label everything, obviously, because she was so little and she wasn't feeding at the moment, but we needed to freeze them. And she obviously was going to be tube fed. So we went to see her. I was in a wheelchair, obviously I'd just given birth, and I think that was a big thing for me, is that I forgot, because I'm like 23 weeks. I thought, oh, it's all right, just get up and off you go. But Richard was like, you've still just given birth, Nicole. Like, you need to
Doesn't
take
matter
your
how
time.
far along you are, you've still gone through that process.
And I was like, oh, I could hardly walk, and I was just
exhausted.
Probably just exhausted. Yeah. So they're like, no wheelchair, off you go in a wheelchair. So yeah, we went to see her on NICU, and she's so tiny in this incubator. Obviously, you've seen an incubator yourself.
Yeah.
And you've got a full-size baby in it, it's just like, oh, they still look so tiny, but when we've got a 23-weeker...
Yeah. And that's why
teddy.
when we went into NICU, everyone was going, oh my God, your baby's massive.
Massive, yeah. I'm like, no, she's just a normal size baby.
She's just full term. She's a full-term, normal-size baby.
Yeah, exactly.
She wasn't a little weight, but she also wasn't massive. She was like 8-13, so she's on the larger side, but she wasn't like a 10, 12-pounder, I suppose.
No, yeah.
But everyone was saying she was massive, but I'm like, you're putting her up against...
Yeah.
preemie babies.
Exactly, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so we had, obviously, that consultant did get pictures of Luna, because that was another thing that we were both so worried about, is what is a 23-week baby going to look like? Mm-hmm. Are they going to be deformed? Are they going to be fully developed? Like, we just had no idea. And before I gave birth to Luna, I remember speaking to a midwife that we've become really close to. She was lovely. She was amazing. And I remember asking her, and she just said, Nicole, she's just going to look like a baby.
Yeah.
She's still a baby, but just a really, really small version.
Yeah.
And she was right. Like, she was just a tiny little dot of a baby. Like,
but everything was there, fingers, toes, everything.
All fingers, toes, eyes, nose, ears, like, fully formed baby. Just a miniature one.
The cute one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, honestly, they're like a little fingers and a tiny little button nose.
Yeah. It was all there just in miniature.
Yeah, she was just perfect. Yeah. And obviously she had all these tubes, so she was intubated. She had a tube down in her mouth to help her breathe, and she had a tube in her nose ready for when she was to be fed. Mm-hmm. She had tubes coming out of umbilical cord, because there's one vein and there's one artery, so they put them in both. Yeah. So it was just a bit surreal seeing obviously her, but then also all the other babies, because it was full.
Yeah.
That was the last bed that they had, which we were transferred for that bed.
So you sort of, it sounds horrible to put it like this, but you sort of got the last
bed, in that hospital at the time. Yeah. So it was just a complete whirlwind, and being on NICU, I think any NICU parent like yourself will know, it's just a complete other world. Yeah. That unless you get put in it, you just have no idea.
It's like you're on your own separate planet. Yeah. I found you're in a bubble and the outside world doesn't exist.
No, yeah. And I mean, even as a nurse, I don't think I'd ever stepped foot in a NICU before.
No.
Like, obviously I've been in an intensive care for adults, but seeing babies or children that are so small and so vulnerable, like, it was so hard, and like you've got all the machines, like it's silent, like you say, because there's no crying.
It's calm, isn't it? It's very strange, because you think these are little tiny people that are the most vulnerable in the world. Out of any patient that you can find, they're the most vulnerable, and you expect it because they'll be the most sick as well, like, most critical, and you expect chaos. Yeah. And it's the total opposite. No. It's so regimented and structured and calm, and it's like you say, I found it quite eerie. Yeah. Sometimes with the level of noise, because you felt like it's a horrible analogy, but when you walk into a library and you can't talk.
Yeah. Well, it is like that, or you feel afraid of talking as well.
Yeah, like you don't want to make any noise. And I remember when we were on the ward in the NICU unit, and we were in high dependency, like we even had to put on headphones, so we couldn't sort of eavesdrop, if you like, not that we would, but on other people's consultations about their babies.
Oh, yeah. Gosh.
So when they did the ward round, so there was only 4 beds in our unit, including ours. When they were consulting with other parents, we were asked to put on ear defenders.
Oh, crikey. Yeah. We never had that.
Yeah.
Different. Yeah. So, there we were with our little tiny Luna. With the nurse, obviously she had one-to-one care, so she was in like the way that they work the beds is that the furthest away you are from the door is the highest dependency.
Okay.
So she was in like room 6, and then as she moved closest to the door, you went down in room numbers until you were like right at the door, which was then like the going home door.
Yeah, which is, you've told me that before, and that was interesting because I never knew that while we were in hospital, but Yeah, our daughter got moved to another room that was closer to the door when she moved to low dependency.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I never knew that.
No, yeah. So we were like the end room, the furthest you could get from obviously going home. We saw all the consultants. Luna amazed. Obviously, she amazed us because like we just did not expect.
You were expecting the worst.
Although we wanted her to be here, all you get drilled into you is what the worst is going to be.
Prepare yourself.
Yeah, and they have to like fully appreciate and understand that. They have to prepare you for that. So when she was here and she was alive and like we had the first consultant meeting and he was like, oh my God, like she's doing amazing because even though she was intubated, she wasn't actually on any oxygen. So she was just on like 21%, which is what we breathe in and out, like normal room air.
She was on the bare minimum.
Bare minimum oxygen. She didn't need additional oxygen. She didn't need any additional support for like a blood pressure. And she was just doing great. Like she was
fairly stable, wasn't she?
She was, yeah, she was stable from the beginning. The only thing that was a bit unstable was her blood sugars, but because she was so premature, that's just one of those things that they find difficult to regulate. And obviously her body temperature, but she was in an incubator for that. So yeah, she was just diddy little dot, like the smallest thing you could, like the size of your hand, like she was tiny. So we just sat with her for a bit and like spoke to the doctors and then the nurse that was looking after her. But then obviously I was still a patient at this point. So I had to go back to the ward for obviously my care. So we went back to the ward, but we were welcome to come in and out of the NICU as we wanted.
Hours,
yeah. So we went back to the ward, obviously to update everybody again, get my care, and then we eventually, even though I wanted to stay where I was because I had the midwife that met me on my first day, she now came, so she was the one that took us to meet Luna, which was lovely because she was like I've said before, she was amazing.
She got a milkshire.
No, so this was a different one. No, she didn't milk me.
She wasn't the milking maid.
No, she wasn't. No, that was the night midwife that milked me, and then the other midwife came on, and she was like similar age, like similar humour, like it was, you know, when it's just like your friends.
Yeah.
Even though we weren't, it's the first time we'd met her, but like it was just really easy and really comfortable, and like Richard got on well with her, like even in the worst situation we could be in, she made us laugh. And she just treated us like normal humans, not like parents that could lose a baby or have just given birth to a newborn, like a premature baby. So I said to her like, oh, I think I need to move to the other room now because like this was not the best room because I had like all the incubators and stuff. It was like a delivery room. So, and I just wanted to be comfortable because I was on a delivery bed, not on like an actual bed.
A normal hospital bed. Not that they're comfy, but
no,
better.
Yeah. So she reluctantly took me to the like postnatal ward. And that was really difficult because you can hear other babies.
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't have my baby with me. By this point, my boobs were like filling with milk because she'd done such a good job. They were like, okay, we need to feed a baby,
like
let's go.
Like, I'm on now.
Yeah, so I got like she got me a breast pump machine because I was like, well, if this is the only thing that I can do, then I am going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, whether it causes me pain, discomfort, whatever, I'm doing it.
It's the only thing you've got in your control.
That was it, yeah. And if that's the only thing that I could give to Luna, and it was, and they like obviously made me aware that my milk was the best thing for her, especially at her gestational age. It was like its own little medicine. Like it gave her the immunity and
it's got its own health benefits. And I think whether you've got a preemie or a full term baby, you know, like we were encouraged like to pump when our daughter was quite poorly. You know, and they were like, you know, but please don't make yourself ill if you can't. But if you can, brilliant. And you had from a pumping or breastfeeding or harvesting experience, you had such a different experience second time around than you did at the first.
My god, it was amazing. For one, I was amazed that my body even produced milk at 23 weeks. But like they said, but your body knows that you've just given birth, so it will.
It was like that midwife sort of switched the light on for you, and she sort of triggered it. And
definitely helped it going. Flowing, So she got me a breast pump. Got like someone to come and show me how to do that, and talk to me about breast pump pumping while your baby's on NICU. Obviously, because it's completely different. You need like all the hormones and stimulation when you're feeding your baby. You're normally looking at them, and so when you've got a NICU baby, you can't be with them. You can be with them 24 hours a day, but it's not healthy for you to be, because you've got to look after yourself. So she like came and spoke to me, make sure you're eating, make sure you're drinking. They actually provided the NICU mums with a food token. So if you were breastfeeding NICU mum, you got a meal voucher once a day to make sure you got a healthy hot meal.
Oh, wow. So, but as a patient, wouldn't you have been fed anyway on the ward?
Yes, but this was to go to the canteen. Sorry,
right.
This was to go to the canteen to get a meal.
I was just thinking, like, surely they're feeding you if you're a patient.
Yeah. So at this point, I was still a patient.
Yeah.
But then, so I was still a patient at this point.
Yeah.
But I very quickly made myself not a patient. Because,
wink,
wink. So, obviously, when you've got a baby in NICU so far away from home, there's going to be a point that I'm going to be discharged, and there's going to be a point that Luna's still in hospital for a very long time after. And we had a little room off the ward that we could be in together. That was great, initially.
And then you got discharged.
And then so obviously I was in a side room, and then there's 2 rooms on the postnatal ward that parents can have after discharge for NICU. So I got given one of them, got moved literally over the road, got moved into that, right facing my other room. But then they have also flats in this hospital that I was at that NICU parents can have only once you're discharged. So I was like, and the nurse was like telling me there's a waiting list, so I like pushed for me to get discharged like the day after, 2 days after I gave birth, and they could give me on iron tablets because like the blood loss and obviously my antibiotics. So I was like, yeah, I'll be fine, just discharge me. So then I could get on the list for this flat very quickly. Actually, we got it the same day. We were very lucky. So as soon as I'd moved into one room, I had to move all my stuff over to the other side of the hospital into this little parents' flat while we were in this hospital in NICU. So that's when I got my meal vouchers. So now I'm not a patient. You got 1 free hot meal a day while you were on NICU.
I remember I got meals when I was a patient.
Yeah.
But because I had such major surgery.
Yeah.
I didn't eat for about 6 days.
Yeah.
Post surgery.
Yeah.
Or very, very little. But my husband could stay with me in the ward, because we had our own little room. Like was in quarantine, if you remember. So he had a bed and I had a bed, and it was like our own little self-contained studio, if you like. No kitchen facilities, obviously, because you're on a ward. But he was eating my food because they wouldn't feed him.
No.
But I didn't want anything to eat.
So I
was going, what do you want to eat?
Yeah.
And he was picking it off the menu and they were delivering it for him.
Oh yeah, why not? Make the most of it.
Yeah.
So
sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
With that anecdote.
So we'd got this little flat. So we went to the supermarket that was round the corner from the hospital, and like filled the fridges, like with all your essentials that you need. So we could go back and like make a quick meal, rather than obviously spending a fortune in the hospital canteen. And got all like the essentials that we needed. I ended up buying a breast pump because I couldn't take the hospital one to this flat.
They're on wheels and stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, it's so big and bulky.
Yeah.
So I said I'd prefer to have the hospital one at my bedside next to Luna, so I can pump next to Luna. Yeah. And then I got another one from the shops, obviously, to have in my room. Yeah. So because I was
they let me take my big wheeled one.
I mean, I could. But it was so big and bulky and such a far way to walk down this rackety corridor. Like, it was a nightmare.
I was in a wheelchair and I had like suitcase in one hand and the breast pump in the other. And my husband was pushing me down the hospital corridors with it.
Oh, so because I was doing so well with pumping at this point, I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to buy one and like just do it when I'm at home. I'm doing my fingers, you can't see me, but doing it in my room.
Quotation
and then also doing it at the bedside with Luna, with the hospital one. So that worked really well. And again, days later she was doing really well. No complications, no like oxygen increase, still didn't need any additional support for her blood pressure, just her insulin levels, glucose levels were a bit up and down, and they just had to alter that. So she's doing really well. So the other thing was that she had to have like brain scans because she was so premature. Like obviously the skull isn't fused and stuff when they're that age, very soft, and they forewarned us to expect her to have bleeds on the brain post delivery because of like the delivery. And the handling of her when she was born, to be put into an incubator and intubated and all that, they told us to expect to have bleeds on the brain. But her first scan, I don't know if it's the same day or a few days later, was negative. She didn't have any bleeds, and again, like the doctors were like, "Whoa, like this, yeah, she's a little fighter, like she's just not got anything." So that was really positive. We were really happy about that, obviously, because, well, as you know, if you have any brain damage, it can then cause long-term issues. So for her not to have that was just like, oh God, like maybe is going to be one of our little miracle. And you know, there was miracles lined on the corridor, like all these lovely success stories that when you were walking down the NICU corridor, they had pictures like of when they're born and then now,
like when they sort of graduate from NICU as well.
Yeah, so it was like, it was nice to see that, like, there is babies that survive that are born at this gestation. Yeah. And we felt really positive because we were being told, you know, like, she's amazing, she's doing this, she's not got brain bleed, she's not requiring any oxygen, so on and so forth. So it got to a point that I hadn't been home for about 10 days now, so I hadn't seen our other little girl for 10 days.
Because when did you go, you went into labour at the end of March, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, so
she was actually born.
She was born. So yeah, she was born on the 28th of March.
Yeah.
And Lila turned 2 the day after, on the 29th of March.
So they were born a day apart.
Yeah, really. A day apart. So obviously we didn't celebrate little Lila's birthday because I was in hospital. And luckily at the age she was none the wiser.
Yeah.
And she just had to carry on going to nursery and being looked after by family, and obviously Daddy when he got home from being at the hospital with me all day. So it got to the point, it was 10 days, and now she was like asking, like, oh, where's mummy? Because we just kept saying I was at work, because she's like, I video called her every day, and I was like in a hospital environment. She was used to me being in a hospital environment from work.
So how old was Luna at this point?
I don't know, like, oh God.
Because you just said you'd been in hospital, you'd been away for like 10
days. So she wouldn't let me, got a diary on my phone, hang on Jodie. Was she about...
Was this maybe Friday then? The Friday of that week if she was born on the Tuesday?
Yeah.
So she was about 3 or 4 days old, wasn't she?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm just trying to find it now. So 3 days old?
3 days, yeah.
Yeah.
And she was stable?
And she was stable, yeah. So I was encouraged by the team at the hospital to maybe go home for one night so I could see my other daughter, get anything that I needed, you know, and then come back, because obviously Luna was in NICU, she had one-to-one nursing, she was stable, and I needed to think of myself and my other little girl. So after a lot of encouragement, I decided to go home. So that was like when she was 3 days old. So Richard came, bless him, he came all the way from home to the hospital, picked me up and drove. After being with Luna for the day, we then went home, like, to get Lila from nursery.
Yeah.
So I could pick Lila up for the first time in ages. And that was, like, the most emotional reunion ever.
Yeah,
like, even all the nursery girls were crying because obviously they knew what was going on.
Yeah.
To help support us. Went home, tried to have as normal night we could.
Yeah.
You know, had a proper meal, like, at a table, not on my knee.
Yeah, and I suppose for him, it was probably helpful that Lila was at the age she was, because she wouldn't be constantly asking questions. She didn't know what was going on, so it allowed you to distract your mind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So got home, had a meal, did the usual, got Lila to bed, pyjamas, just relax. And so I was on edge all the time, because I was like, if anything changes, you phone us, like, we can come straight back. We've got standby for Lila, like, we can come back. Anything changes, she becomes unwell, whatever, call us. We hadn't heard from them, so before, like, I was getting ready to go to bed kind of thing, I thought, no, I'm just going to give them a call. Yeah. So I just give them a call just to say, like, oh, just checking in, is she okay? And they're like, yeah, she's doing really well. It's whoever's going to be, like, take over for the night nurse, if she'll phone you, we've got your numbers, we'll phone you if anything changes. Like, that was their process, that's what they did anyway. But I reiterated, like, please phone me for anything changes, anything goes wrong, call me. So went to sleep, didn't hear anything, woke up in the morning,
Quite
hadn't
positive,
heard.
yeah.
Yeah, thought, oh, this is good. So what we were going to do is Richard was going to go back to the hospital to see and be with Luna for one night, and I was going to stay home for one night again, like 2 nights as such, with Lila to have a day with her.
Yeah, so you're just sort of switching roles.
Switching roles, yeah. So that was the plan. So off Richard went, like, first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock, he's there to get there for the consultant ward round, which is usually about 10. So he got there. Obviously, I was like checking my phone, like, why's he not phone? He told me he's there, but now he's not told me. He's told me he's arrived at the hospital.
But not that he's arrived with Luna.
So I was like, getting myself all on edge, thinking, oh God, what's going on? And when I did hear from him, he was all in a bit of a panic, and it was all very stressful.
Ring you?
Yeah, so he phoned me because I think I was probably texting him, like, what's going on?
Like, you're not answering
your
phone.
There? Yeah, so he phoned and he said, like, when he got there, it was very busy. A lot of people were around, and then he soon realised that it was because of Luna that everybody was there, so he was a bit like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And he heard the consultant say, like, only let me speak to Dad. So the consultant came over, I don't know if they put him in a room, but spoke to him and said that she's had an unsettled night, but they hadn't phoned us. So she had an unsettled night. Her ET tube, which is a breathing tube
that goes down the throat
to help into a lung to help breathe, became dislodged. And they had trouble to get another tube in. And then once they'd done that, they've done like an X-ray to check the position of the tube. That was fine, but they've then noticed that she's got a possible bowel perforation on the X-ray. So it was all like, obviously...
Which can be caused...
So they're saying that at first they were like, we don't know why it's there. And they give a list of reasons what it could be. So the most common in extreme prematures is something called NEC, NEC. Don't ask me the full pronunciation because I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But it's basically, it's basically a severe infection in the bowel of premature babies, where the bowel just like dies and just dies. It's called necrotizing something. Yeah. So that was his most common reason that she's got bowel perforation. And then he listed off other things, and he said that the least common cause would be them, that they've caused the injury.
Well, of course, that would be the least common.
Yeah. So we were like, okay. So it was all very rushed and very stressful, and it was, we've spoken to a different hospital because although they were a level 3, they didn't perform surgery on premature babies.
Yeah.
So
because they'd established that she'd need surgery to fix the bowel perforation. Yeah. That they discovered on the X-ray that wasn't searching for the bowel perforation. They were checking the ET tube that had gone. Which they usually do as standard, don't they? They do an X-ray to
so
make sure
anytime they put a tube in, the X-ray to
make sure
it's
in the right position.
Yeah. So they did that, saw something else.
Which then snowballed into something.
Yeah, so it was all very delayed because this removal of a tube, or dislodged, however they would like to call it, was approximately about 1 o'clock in the morning. Obviously Richard got there at 10, and it was only just seen on the X-ray when the consultant came in, that was performed at 2 o'clock in the morning, that she'd got a bowel perforation. So she'd been left overnight with this, and the X-ray wasn't reviewed.
So it was done but wasn't reviewed.
Yeah. Or it was reviewed and not picked up.
Yeah, so we don't know, do we?
Yeah. So it was all discussed with this other hospital. They accepted her to be transferred there for urgent bowel surgery. So I was just like, obviously just got this phone call. I'm like, oh my God, my tiny baby now needs to be transferred to another hospital for bowel surgery at 4 days old. Like, it was just so
not
much.
What you expected
Absolutely
to wake
not.
up to.
So then I was like, right, now I need to get someone else to come and have Lila, because I've got to go and meet them at another hospital to go through our next nightmare of our daughter now having bowel surgery. So it took a few hours, obviously, to get everything arranged. An emergency ambulance came that specialises in premature transfers. They transferred her, but she was on what they call minimal handling, so she wasn't allowed to be held, she wasn't allowed to be rolled, she wasn't really allowed to be touched other than minute movements to change a nappy, because any movement caused like intracranial pressure, which could cause bleeds in her brain. So she had to be obviously handled a lot to be put into another incubator for the transfer. Then and then obviously the actual journey was up and down, in the back of the ambulance, and then transferred again at the other end onto another incubator. So she had a lot of handling. Got there, put in a side room, spoken to by the surgeons and the consultants there. And again, it was, we don't really know what's caused it, but it could be X, Y, and Z. We won't find out until she has the surgery. So the two options were to leave her to see how she goes, or to perform surgery tonight, like straight away, while she's so well as a prem.
While she's in a good position.
To survive surgery, to do it now, in hope that she would survive surgery and survive the outcome. So obviously, again, a massive difficult decision. We decided to opt for surgery because that's what they recommended while she was so well. So long story short, she had this bowel surgery. They did find a very small hole, which was like a new, clean, fresh hole. So it hadn't been there for a long time, because she hadn't had any symptoms. Like they said, if it'd been there a long time, she would be really unwell, and she wasn't.
So
it was new, fresh. It was fresh, it was small, and it was right where her feeding tube, which goes up her nose into her stomach, where she was having my milk, it was right where the tip of that was. So they told us that their beliefs were that the feeding tube had caused the bowel perforation.
Because it had been pushed in too far.
And there was milk, like, on the outside of her stomach, obviously, from where they'd been feeding her, that had, like, collected there, so she had to have a good wash out and a little suture, and she survived. Again, we weren't sure if she'd even survive this, but she survived, and she survived afterwards, so we got to see her. And from that surgery, and probably from one hospital to the next hospital, it was like she was a completely different baby. So obviously the journey was difficult for her, the transfer was difficult for her. She had to be transferred and handled in surgery a lot. So the next day when they performed another head scan, they told us that she'd now got 2 bleeds on the brain.
Which she never had before.
And they go in grade. So she was, it was the weekend, so they looked at it themselves and said that it's likely to be a grade 2 and a grade 3, one on each side, like, which are quite severe.
What's the highest grade, do you know?
3.
The highest grade is 3, okay.
Yeah. So, as far as I'm aware anyway, grade 2 and grade 3 bleeds on her brain, obviously, and that would affect her outcome long term if she was to survive. And she just went downhill. So obviously we're now at a different hospital that actually is a little bit closer to our home. We'd been given another room in the ward as a parents, and they also had a Ronald McDonald over the road, so we got put on the waiting list for there because it was full. We spent as much time with her as we could, but she was just different. Like, she was a different colour, she just didn't look the same. She had to have, like, lots of blood transfusions. She got infection, so they had to give her, like, lots of more antibiotics, and it just went from bad to worse, really. With her, she required oxygen, so she went from requiring no oxygen to 100% oxygen. One of the nights, I actually got called at about 6 o'clock in the morning to say, like, you need to come in. At this point, we were in a I was in a Ronald McDonald room over the road. Richard was still travelling to and from the hospital and home. So I got called, woke up and said, she's not doing very well, I think we should come. So got to the bedside, and she'd been changed her oxygen overnight to something called nitric oxide to try and help with her breathing. So they put her on that. Again, her oxygen levels were still dropping, so she kept requiring more and more. She's on maximum of everything. She started requiring, like, help with her blood pressure. There was just everything that could go wrong now seemed to be going wrong.
Anything and all the things that she didn't need help with before, she now needed assistance with. So we had meetings, obviously, with the paediatrics, the neonatalists and the paediatrics, and, we said, obviously we would do anything to save our daughter, and they would, to a point that it wasn't going to cause her any more damage or distress. So while she was responding to treatment,
they would still give her the treatment. So, change her oxygen, it helped her. Do this, it helped her. So to this point, it was, she needed, oh God, my mind's gone blank. She needed, what did she need? Oh dear. I can't think.
You were pointing at your chest.
I was pointing at my chest. A chest drain. Oh God, that's simple.
Yeah.
She needed a chest drain because she'd got a pneumothorax and a lung had collapsed.
Okay.
So she needed a chest drain to re-expand a lung as such. So they did that to her. We had this meeting with the consultants, and they said, we'll do everything we can, and if she responds to it, then great. But there has to be a point that we have to say, like, enough's enough, because she's so tiny. Mm-hmm. There's only so much that somebody can take.
Yeah.
So we were like, yeah, absolutely. And obviously they said the more, like, she's got brain damage, she's got problems with her lungs, the more chance she's going to have if she does survive, like, as she grows older, that she's going to be disabled or severely disabled.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult for us both, because obviously we wanted our daughter more than anything. She was a wanted and loved baby. Mm-hmm. And the thought of saying, no, enough's enough, because she's suffering, it's like fighting against what you want and what's best for your daughter.
It goes against every natural instinct in your body, doesn't it?
Yeah, so although we absolutely wanted our daughter, but we wanted her to be well, we didn't want her to suffer.
Yeah.
Especially, like, in long term, we didn't, if she survived,
and it's about her quality of life.
Quality of life, massively. Yeah, like, would she be able to do anything? Would she know of her existence? Like, it was getting to that point now that it might not be. So me and Richard obviously had a long conversations, and we kind of said, she'll decide. Like, she'll tell us when enough's enough.
Were you both on the same page?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So
It wasn't like one was fighting the other side didn't.
Yeah. No, we both were. I think obviously we both struggled massively with saying enough's enough. It's time to let go.
Yeah.
Because it just like, it goes against everything, doesn't it? So, and it was so hard, like, it was so draining being in that environment constantly, and like hardly sleeping, and then being called back, and then I did just sit with her for like 12, 13, 14 hours a day. And obviously Richard came as well, but it was, even though you weren't doing anything, it's physically and mentally exhausting. And then all this information overload and having to make these decisions constantly, it was just...
And you don't know what to do for the best. So
no.
If they're giving you A and B, you don't... And the decision is yours, you don't know what to do for the best.
Exactly. So that night we said, Luna will tell us, like, she'll tell us when enough's enough. So they managed to stabilise her the best they could after this chest drain. Richard went home to Lila, and I was sat with Luna, and a lady came to me, and she introduced herself as the bereavement midwife.
Shocking.
And I just looked at her and I was like, can you not? Like, my daughter's alive. Can you really not, even if that is your title, don't introduce yourself as that.
No.
And I was in shock, and I was just like, oh my God, like, you haven't told me that this is end now.
Yeah.
And now you've just introduced yourself as, like, the end person. And I was
crazy.
Just like, luckily Richard wasn't there, because how he would have took that. Oh my God, yeah. And she brought, like, a memory box with her, like, it's really important that we get memories. And I'm like, like, do you all know something that we don't? Because you've not told us, like, she's imminently going to die.
Yeah.
You've just said we'll do everything we can, but there's a point we have to stop. So it was just, like, completely baffled by this. Yeah.
Slapped around the face.
Yeah, so obviously Richard wasn't here, so I said, well, Richard's going to come back tomorrow, like, maybe we could do this together, whatever they were going to do or say. So I took the box off her and kind of just put it underneath the cart and thought, oh God, like... So the next day, a different lady from this team came to see me before Richard arrived. And I said to her, when Richard gets here, please do not introduce yourself as a bereavement midwife, because he will not, like, cope with that, and he will flip.
No.
Like, this. It just sounds awful.
It's just insensitive as well, like...
Yeah, honestly, I was just like, oh, God.
No.
So, and then when they explained the role, like, I fully appreciate their role. Like, they aren't just a bereavement midwife, you know, when baby's died or at the end.
They need to make that clear. But they need in their job
so they're there as like support for the parents, to do the memory making and to do all the nice
She should have introduced herself just as like a
support
worker or whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah. So this was Richard came. She really wasn't doing well. Like, she was really struggling with her oxygen machines were going beeping constantly because everything was dropping. The consultants came and said she'd now got her other lung has now collapsed. So because she responded so well to the first chest drain, they said we'll put another chest drain in. So we agreed with it because we thought it would help her. But we didn't want to watch the process. It's quite brutal watching, you know, anything like that. So I thought, right, we'll go back over to Ronald McDonald, make a brew. I just put some washing in because like you've got washing machines and everything. Yeah. Said we'll come back, you know, in half an hour when it's over. Yeah, it's fine. So off we went, put washing in or whatever, and my phone rang, and it was obviously the NICU. And I just remember looking at Richard like, oh, this is not going to be good.
No.
And I answered the phone, and it was the bereavement midwife.
Yeah.
And she just said, Nicole. And I knew.
Just then?
Just
without
knew.
Any more words.
And yeah. And she said, Nicole, you need to come back now. And I just dropped my phone. And I just stood there and I just screamed. And I was hitting the wall and hitting my head. And I was like, no. Like, I'm not ready. Like, I'm not ready to let her go. Like, she's ready to go. But I'm not ready to let her go. And Richard was like trying to console me, obviously, and be like, come on, we need to get over there, but like try and be calm, like we've got to walk through all these other parents that are also suffering. Yeah. But obviously I was like,
you don't think like that,
horrible way, I don't think like that, I don't care about anyone else, I just care about Luna. So running across the road, across the whole of the car park, and Richard's like, you need to calm down, Nicole, calm down, like we've got to be strong for her now. So we went up to her, and I just ran through the doors, like, I didn't care who was there, slammed open the doors, and they'd got all the curtain, like, you know, the little foldable curtains around her, and there was other parents in the room with their children and babies. And I was just screaming, and obviously being a nurse, I'm looking at the monitor straight away, and her heart rate was slowing down, and I was just like, oh, this is it. And they were like, yeah, like, it's time to let her go now. And Richard couldn't cope. Richard couldn't cope, and he just ran out of the room, and he's like, I can't watch this. But I just wanted to hold her, because we'd never held her. Sorry. I'm making Jodie cry now.
Don't be sorry, do apologise.
We'd never really held her other than just holding her while the nurses changed bedding. All I wanted to do was just cradle her. So they got her out of her incubator, still attached to the breathing tubes. I said, I just don't want her to be in pain. That was the biggest thing, because don't let her suffer. Like, let her go, but don't let her suffer. So they kept her on all the morphine drips that she was on for pain. And basically stopped everything else. And I just held her. And I just kept saying sorry. Because I blamed myself for the whole of this, that my body didn't do the right thing and didn't keep her safe. So I already had so much guilt that all of this was my fault. And I just kept saying sorry to her and holding her as close as I could. Like, she was inside my top, so we could do skin to skin. So, because she was so tiny, I could literally just pull my cotton out like this and put her down my top. I had skin to skin with her and just held her. And Richard did come back in and spent some time with us, but it was all too much for him. So he went into like, they called it the snowdrop suite, which is like where you go when your baby's died or dying. So they put him in there, and then they wheeled me through eventually on a chair. They took her off everything apart from a morphine drip. And I knew that she'd gone. Yeah. Because I knew that she wouldn't last long. I just wanted to spend time with her and hold her. And like, Lila's favourite song when she was little was Twinkle Twinkle. So I'd sing into her. And just loving her.
Yeah. And spending some time with her that
you've
not really had.
No, some quality time. And it's obviously really hard because she wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And Richard was, a big believer that she's gone now. And, like, a spirit's gone. We're not religious at all, but in that situation, a spirit's gone now. Like, she's not suffering. But I couldn't accept that she'd gone, and I just wanted to be with her. So the right thing for us was that Richard chose to go home because he was really struggling watching her. Obviously, they change. Bodies change when they die.
Okay,
That's right. So he chose to go home because he just wanted to be with Lila and get comfort from her.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go home. And that was the right thing for us. A lot of people, even the midwives, found that very strange that we chose to separate. But
it's what was right for you two as individuals, wasn't it?
And if I forced Richard to stay, he would resent me, and vice versa. If he forced me to go home, I would have resented him.
Yeah.
So we did that. We've been together 10 years. We know each other. We know what was right. So he went to Lila, and I stayed in this room with Luna and this lovely bereavement midwife that now was relevant. She stayed with us, and I wanted to do everything that our mum should do. So I wanted to give her a first bath, and I wanted to put her in her first clothes like you should when your baby's born. And we got handprints and footprints, and did the bath and made her smell lovely, and put her in a little baby grow, like the tiniest baby grow you've ever seen. And they were made specially for situations like this, and they came in pairs, so she had one and then we have a matching one. And the same with she has a little bonnet, a little hat. So I did all that and just spent hours in the room with her. But I was never offered, I only know about it now since I've been going to bereavement groups, but we were never offered, like, they call it a cold cot, where you can put the baby in the cot, and it's specially designed to help preserve the body
for as long as possible.
So if you did want to stay with your baby, then you can. But I was never offered that. I was offered to stay if I wanted to stay overnight, but I just thought she'd just be like just in a cot, and she was already changing, and I was struggling I wanted to remember her as this tiny little red glowing baby.
Yeah, a little soft.
Not skin changes and all of that. So I chose to go home after I'd done everything, but I wanted to take her to the last place that she would be, at the Chapel of Rest. So I did. So I carried her down. I had to phone my brother at this time to come and get me because I couldn't drive. My car was there, obviously, from being there since she needed surgery, but I couldn't drive home. So my brother, bless him, came all the way and sat in the car park until I was ready. So I took her down to the Chapel of Rest, or whatever you want, morgue, basically.
Yeah.
Not nice at all, but I wanted to do the final journey with her as such. And two of the girls came with me, and we sat in this little room until, like they said, are you ready to let go? And obviously I wasn't.
No.
I didn't want to let go. But I won't ever forget that when I handed her over and they took her from me, honestly, the pain that I had in my heart, like it felt like my heart literally broke. And it was so painful just letting her go, knowing that I'd never see her again and never be able to take her home. And that was it. That was it. And then I had to walk out of the hospital with only memories that we'd made of her footprints. You're meant to walk out of the hospital with your baby in your arms, or like that proud dad moment of them carrying out in the car seat. And we never got that with Luna. And, literally walking out with empty arms, it felt like, although I had these bags of memories and a little casts that we did and her clothes and everything, but it was just the hardest thing I've ever done is to walk away and leave her there. Yeah. So obviously we went home to Richard and just cried and cried and cried into each other's arms for God knows how long, and then we'll have to go to sleep, or try to go to sleep at some point, and we did, and then to wake up and Lila's there, and
she doesn't know anything either.
So Lila knew that Mummy was pregnant. Mm-hmm. She was old enough to understand that. She knew she was having a little sister.
Yeah.
But when we went into hospital, we didn't want to tell her that, like, Mummy was poorly and baby was poorly. But when I came home for that one night, when everything went wrong, she kicked my tummy by accident. And, like, previously, obviously, when Luna was still in my tummy, we'd be like, oh, careful, baby. I was getting a change for bed, and she kicked my tummy, and she was like, oh, baby, baby. And I said to Rich, God, we'll have to tell her, because, like, baby's not in Mummy's tummy anymore. So we chose to tell her that Luna had been born, and she'd got a baby sister called Luna, and that she was living with Mummy and Daddy was living with Lila, and that was as much we chose to tell her. We didn't bring her into hospital because I didn't want her to be traumatised. I didn't want her to see and hear all the beeps, and she was a toddler. Like, she
wouldn't have understood
she'd
anyway.
just want to run riot.
Yeah.
And like play, like she loved baby dolls at this point, and like, you know, swings them round by their legs when they're little dolls and stuff, and push them in a pram, and she wouldn't understand why she couldn't do that with Luna, because she literally looked like a baby doll. She was that small. Like, why can't I dress her and feed her and play with her? So we chose to protect her and not to do that. So yeah, obviously we just had to pretend. Again, my brother, he was amazing. He did everything for us. He got up in the morning, collected Lila, took her to nursery, picked her up. He did everything with Lila, just to help us, because we just couldn't face the outside world or seeing anybody. And we just, I don't know how long we spent, but I just felt like we spent weeks in the living room, like lying on the sofa, just sleeping. We just had nothing in us. Like, obviously we had Lila, and we're so grateful. Like you said before, we'll talk about having another child, but she was honestly our saving grace, because I don't know where we'd be if we didn't have Lila. Like, she was the reason to get up. Like, I had to get up in the morning because my daughter was in bed, and had to take her to nursery when we were able to. And, you know, she had to have a normal and a bit of normality in her life. So we just had to. And it's amazing. Like, and we did. I think everything hit Richard a bit harder and a bit quicker than it hit me, because he was already watching us both suffer in hospital, whereas I was like just so focused on keeping Luna in my tummy and fighting sepsis and being with her. And I think it hit Richard a lot quicker, and he really suffered quicker than I did. But I was like, Richard didn't want to go out, didn't want to see anyone, which obviously, you know, Richard, he's a very outgoing person, very sociable, and he didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to leave the house, didn't want to go shopping, like nothing. And I was slightly opposite at the beginning, and I was like, well, I've got Lila, like, let's go to the park, like, trying to do something constantly to keep my mind going, because my mind literally drove me insane, because I was like, why did this happen? What if? Why? And constantly questioning everything that we chose and everything that we did, and obviously the guilt and blaming myself.
And at this point in time, you were like, why?
Yeah, we didn't have any answers.
You didn't have any answers at this point, and I'm not saying now that you have all the answers, but you are a bit more informed about the ins and outs of the care that Luna received, and which maybe we'll go into next time on the next episode, where you can sort of explain the sort of the aftermath, if that's the right word, I don't know.
No,
sort
definitely.
Of the course of events that took place after Luna's death.
Yeah, because there's so much more.
You know, I know my story was like a 2-parter, but yours is...
We need about 10, I think,
I think we need about 10 episodes.
I know, we're 2 hours in.
Yeah, 2 hours in on this one, but there's just... Your story is... It is such a complex one.
Yeah.
You've told the story rightly so at this moment of how it played out at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And then
there's been so much added
afterwards.
And, explained since.
Yeah.
Of the reasons why things happened
the way they did.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to go into that in the next one, I think. But yeah, the initial weeks after losing Luna, it was very difficult. We were in a very dark place, although we had Lila. You know, she, like I say, she really did keep us going. But I probably pushed myself to try and get back to normality, like take Lila to the park. Like the weekend after, my brother and his partner came with me to like a Easter some event or something that was on at the farm, because I just wanted to be normal for Lila. And yeah, I was so far from it.
Distracted, because for an hour or two at that Easter party or that Easter egg hunt or whatever, you're just living in that moment, and everything else you've sort of left at home. And you're just concentrating on like Lila having a good time. And what do you think it was easy that she didn't understand?
Yes.
Because in a sense she wasn't able to grieve because she didn't understand.
No, yeah.
So you weren't dealing with Lila's grief have to as well.
Yeah, exactly. She was at that age, you know, she'd only just turned 2 the day after her sister was born. So, like I say, she knew Mummy was pregnant, she knew she had a baby sister, but she never really asked because she didn't have that understanding of what a baby sister meant.
Yeah.
We didn't show her any pictures because obviously she was a lot tinier and a lot different than what a normal full-term baby would look like. So yeah, I think for her, she was blissfully unaware.
Yes.
And that probably did help us, although, you know, we might not have realised it at that time.
No.
But I think, you know, rather than explaining to a 2-year-old or a child that their sibling has died, you know, and they have a lot of questions, don't they?
Yeah.
Like I think if she knew now, like now she's 3, I think if it happened now, she'd have so many questions. Why, Mummy? Why?
Yeah.
Where
she's
is she?
a lot more intuitive and curious and aware.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Maybe would have been harder.
No, yeah. And we've always said that when she gets to an age where she understands, like, I think she's still too early. Yeah. Obviously, everybody's different, but for us, she's still too young.
Depends on the child as well.
Yeah, I mean, Lila's very switched on, very intelligent.
But do you have any memories of when you were 3?
No, exactly.
So you think of it, if you look back at your own childhood, what are your earliest memories, and what information is she going to retain at this age? Even if she understands it in the moment, is she going to retain it?
Yeah, no, she doesn't understand. I mean, obviously, like I said previously, Luna was called Luna because of like the moon and the aspect that she's always there, whether we can see her or not, she can always see down on us.
Hence the reason for the podcast, which
we haven't.
We've not explained it because I thought it was maybe a little early to explain the name of the podcast before you had told even just a part of your story.
Yeah.
You know, so we wanted, rather than use Luna's name, we wanted to honour her in a way.
Yeah.
Sort of indirectly, you know, because, you know, she is the inspiration for it, or at least, you know, some of the inspiration for the podcast, and she's your main driver, and, you know, it's sort of, it's to honour her, isn't it, the reason we call it Look to the Moon, because it's also like, you know, when people say, oh, look to the stars, or look to the moon, or, you know, look to the sky, when you need answers. Like you say, we're not spiritual necessarily, either of us, or religious, but it's that, like you say, it's that constant presence.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I know, like, all you girls and all my close friends, like, when I said about Luna and the moon, and, like, that's how I always describe her or where she is.
She's always there.
She's always there, and, like, I know some of you girls have, like, sent me pictures, like, oh, look at the moon tonight, like, she's shining for us, and she's there, and it's just such a lovely thing, and that's actually what Lila does understand, is that she sees the moon and she calls it Lunar Moon.
Yeah.
So that's her very small understanding and connection with her sister is, and bless her, like, even when Mummy's upset sometimes, she says, come on, Mummy, let's look for the moon. Because she knows that, like,
that'll give you some
something
comfort,
for
maybe.
Mummy. Yeah, so we do. So we call it Lunar Moon, and we always look for Lunar Moon at night and the stars, and that's her only understanding. That means that's her sister, and obviously as she gets older we will explain, because obviously she's not the moon, and I fully know that, for anyone that might think like, ooh, you're a strange person. But as Lila gets older,
thinking that.
No, but as she does get older we will explain to her when she's old enough to understand. We will always still talk about Luna and that Lila has a baby sister, but when the time's right, and that's not yet for us.
Yeah, I see.
So yeah,
and there's no right and wrong answer for that.
No, exactly.
You know, it's just
when
own. You feel you're ready to have that conversation. You like you say, it's something where it's when you feel Lila is ready that she will actually retain that information and she'll comprehend. Because it might be like a 2-stage process where you explain in a little bit more detail, but you don't go into the full ins and outs of what happened and why. And,
definitely.
Things like that.
There's things she doesn't need to know. And, maybe like when she's older, like teenager, adult, then fine. If she asks, she will get the story if that's what she wishes. But only that'll be her decision. Like, I'm not going to put that on her until if she ever
wants.
Yeah, and knows. No, just to know that she's got a sister who loved her very much and that we love very much and always will.
Well, I know that's been a really tough couple of hours for you. So thank you for, sharing. I know I knew, or if I knew all of your story, but even listening to it again, I've heard it all before, and it touches me every single time, and I think everyone listening will be touched by the story as well. So we'll probably wrap it up.
Yeah, we need to go blow our noses.
Go blow our noses, wipe our eyes, and all
have
of
some
that.
chocolate.
Yeah, but we are gonna. That is certainly not the end of your story. It's not even, half of the story really, with the stuff that went on last year and this year and
still going on now.
So we'll clock off for this episode, but join us in episode 5, if I've got that right. Episode 5 for Nicole's story, sort of number 2, part 2. So we will see you then.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.